Okay, good evening, everyone. For this evening, until Mr. Ledesma gets here, I'll be conducting the meeting. It is about 6:02. Call the meeting to order. Establish a quorum. Ms. Rumsey?
Yes.
Yes. If you'd please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Ready, begin. Adoption of the agenda. Is there a motion to approve? Just so folks do understand, this is a special board meeting, work study session, and we'll be covering the items that I will be addressing here in just a few minutes. But any speakers have to speak specifically to these items on the agenda. There's no wavering at all. So with that said, adoption of the agenda, is there a motion to adopt this
I'll move.
special? Thank you. Second?
Second.
Thank you. I'm sorry, Ms. Rumsey move, Ms. Erickson second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? 5-0, 2 absent. Public comment?
Yes, we have about 9 cards, 3
Okay.
minutes each, and I will read the instructions.
Okay.
Persons wishing to speak should submit a public comment card prior to the meeting. In general, individual speakers will be allowed 3 minutes to address the board on the agenda items only. The board shall limit the total time for public input on each item to 30 minutes. A speaker shall not yield to another person any portion of the time allotted to him, her to speak. The total time for agenda items shall be 30 minutes. The time allowed for those who made requests to speak will be as follows. 1 to 10 speakers will be allowed 3 minutes, 11 to 15, 2 minutes, 16 to 30, 1 minute. The number of speakers to the agenda item will be determined just prior to the time that item is considered, and speakers must be present to be counted in the total. District students who have presented requests to speak will be allowed to speak before other individuals who have also requested to speak. Individual speaking time may not be reduced to less than 1 minute. Those who presented requests to speak but could not be accommodated within the allotted 30 minutes will be allowed 1 minute each to speak prior to adjournment. The first speaker is Michelle.
Is this just on regular public comment or the work study session?
These are 3. Every single card is 3.
Oh, okay.
Number 3.
Perfect. Thank you.
3A, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's okay. Good evening. At the October board meeting, there were presentations made regarding asset underutilization, regarding empty classrooms, and how this impacted Orange Unified, each particular school site. I am an Orange County Classical Academy special education teacher for upper school. I currently serve 6th through 8th grade, and I'm speaking regarding the district asset management plan. So I would like to, as an educator, say, first of all, that we love all students. There was some erroneous comments made saying that we did not want the mod severe students there. You have been good neighbors as Esplanade and as OCCA, as a special education provider. I firmly am aware that there is a mod severe campus there, and we do hear those students, and that's okay, because I know what that's like. I've been in that world for about 15 years now, and that's okay. It's part of it. So I wanted to, first of all, just let you know that we don't have any problem with any of the students on that campus, and we love all students, and I particularly love all students. I'm an advocate for them, and I'm here to do that tonight as well. We are right next door to Esplanade, and we would like to pay you to rent space. And we are asking to share unused space, both outdoors and indoors, unused classrooms, unused grass, and open spaces. Orange County Classical Academy is a public charter. We do not take tuition. We are not a private school. We get government funding and we actually get less than what Orange Unified typically pays for a school site. We work on less public funds because we are a charter, and we have less space, in fact. But we have more students, about double the number of students and about half the space. So we are asking to work together to the mutual benefit of each of us. Our site would benefit to use the unused space at Esplanade. We don't wish to kick anyone out. We don't wish to push anyone out. We want to work together for the benefit of both campuses. And we hope that the money provided to Orange Unified is helpful to you in continuing to improve the current schools that you have rather than having to close schools. Upper school and high school was also brought up as a concern, that there is El Medina High School down the street and that this would be also an upper school high school. And I wanted to just share some more facts that it would not be a large school like El Medina down the street. It is actually a classical curriculum, and that means that we anticipate for the grades of 6th through 12th grade that there would be just 340 students total, and that's at maximum. And we do not expect to be at maximum in the first, second, or third years. It would take 4 years to get there. So I appreciate all these facts for consideration. I hope you have a wonderful evening.
The next couple of speakers are Beth Cypress is next, then Lori Kaler, then Rosa Otero.
Good evening. My name is Beth Cypress. I'm a graduate of OUSD. My three children are graduates of OUSD, and I currently work at Esplanade Elementary School as the librarian. In regards to the asset management plan that will be presented on later this evening, I'd like to point out the importance of two areas in the presentation. In consideration of determining surplus property, it states that there should be little or minimal impact to educational programs and little or minimal impact to the community. Considering to close, share, lease an open in-use school would not meet these two directives. The responsibility of this board is to the students of OUSD, not county charters like OCCA. A charter's poor planning for expansion should not come at the expense of OUSD's most vulnerable or any OUSD student for that matter. Moving forward, I'd like the board to consider prioritizing OUSD students and stakeholders. Go through the proper processes before doing anything with our existing in-use campuses. Include parent input. Look at empty and available properties first before uprooting and displacing OUSD students. And I'd like to add a couple of things that aren't in my speech since I have extra time. There are no empty spaces at Esplanade Elementary School. That's shown in the utilization report. It is shown in our everyday activities. We've had multiple district people come out and survey and look at and see that we do not have empty classrooms or empty spaces. So your own report shows that, so listen. Listen to what the people who actually work there are telling you, who actually serve disabled students and regular gen ed students every single day at Esplanade. We do not have open space. There is nothing available. All classrooms, every single classroom is in use. Thank you.
Lori Kaler, then Rosa Otero, then I think it's Dawn D.
I would like to thank the board for making decisions on leasing, licensing of unused or underutilized assets to sustain a prosperous future for OUSD. Orange Unified School District, under the leadership of former Superintendent Hansen, mismanaged funds and properties. Trustee Erickson's response on Facebook regarding this is, it's not our job to manage the effective leadership in the district. Someone needs to be responsible. If the district itself is not fiscally responsible, the Orange Unified School Board should be. Measure S, which increased the OUSD community taxes, were insufficiently used by our prior superintendent on science center buildings, which 60% of the students will not feel the positive outcomes. Instead, it could have been used to enhance our high schools and much needed repairs of $1 billion. This is one of the many reasons why firing the superintendent was the right thing to do. It was heartbreaking to hear students begging to not have their school Esplanade shut down. Who was using scare tactics to these children and their families? What I heard from the OCCA people is that they want to lease the unused classrooms and field and share the facility, not take over. There is a huge amount of staff and way dwindling students. We don't want that school shut down because they don't have enough going on there. Trustees Yamasaki, Page, and Erickson disagreed with bringing funding into the district. They protested against leasing unused space for Explore Academy that would bring in tens of thousands of dollars into the district. Please do the right thing for our schools, our students, our community, and our taxpayers by making fiscally responsible decisions and allowing charter schools, which are public schools, to share in the facilities which are vacant or underutilized. Also, when you try to push bonds, you are taxing our families out of the district. So the people who have grew up in this area, that went to all the OUSD schools, our kids can't afford to live here. That is not fair for our kids and grandkids to have the burden of having to pay these ridiculous taxes and not even be able to afford to live here. So please make fiscally wise decisions for our families. Thank you.
I don't see Rosa Otero. So Dawn, is there a Dawn in the room? Get that name. Jolynn? Okay. You'll be next.
Hi, I'm Dawn. I actually live in the district, and I'm here in support of OCCA leasing unused space, the empty classrooms at Esplanade. This is an obvious win-win for the OUSD, Esplanade, and OCCA. The charter school is expanding and needs a space. Esplanade has extra space, and it would provide more dollars for the district. It makes good business sense for all parties, and it's also beneficial for the students. Why would the recall and the board minority trustees, Yamasaki, Page, and Erickson, be against this? What is the motive? Furthermore, it seems there are so many lies being told about this issue. I've been following it on social media, and it's just stunning, actually. I can't hardly even look at it. That somehow OCCA wants to shut down Esplanade, that the board majority is trying to sell it, when actually this would help keep the school open. So please do the right thing for everyone and also allow the charter schools to use underutilized space. Thank you.
After Jolynn will be Linda Cohn.
So I've been having a lot of trouble following along here tonight. I get that you're just using the empty classrooms as all OCCA wants. From what I saw, there was 1. I heard just now 8. They're going to have a small school, a high school of not more than 300. So I don't know how 300 students are going to fit in 1 classroom or even 8 classrooms. It seems like maybe the plan isn't for 1 or 8, it's for a lot more than that, like maybe almost every classroom at that school if you want to have that many kids. And there's also things like we know we don't mind the moderate severe students, but have you seen how many teachers per student there are? I wonder if that's related to the fact that a lot of them are in special education and have a higher teacher to student ratio. And if we close that school and move them somewhere, we're still going to have that teacher to student ratio. It'll just be shoved in somewhere else at another school that doesn't have room, because even if you looked at all the rooms we had at the high schools and the elementary schools, we don't have that much empty rooms to cover everybody that's moving from Esplanade or the however many to just the 330 students that are coming in. So I don't know how this would work where you wouldn't be closing or significantly reducing the amount of students at the school. And to me, that seems less like a scare tactic and more like math. I don't know where to go from here and make this make sense. We have students who are in a school in our district. They are happy there. We have a charter school that is a county charter school. We have schools all over the county. There are probably other schools in other districts that have open space. I know the lack of enrollment is not unique to Orange. It's all across California. So is there another school in Anaheim that had to close a school, or Newport Beach, or somewhere else in the county that would be good for a high school? Because Orange Unified doesn't have the space for it. The only space that we possibly have was Peralta, and that has gone to a different charter school that I don't know if they're open or not. I've heard confusing things on that, but we don't have the space for a high school. So if they want to open one now, somewhere else in the county might be a better fit. Thank you.
After Linda is Florida Sheldon.
Let me begin by saying I'm just as confused as Jolene. I don't quite understand how you have half the number of students at a school and the same number of classrooms, but now somehow you're filling all of those classrooms still. To me, that just doesn't make sense. Maybe somebody can explain to both of us what's going on here. But the real reason that I wanted to just briefly speak is I just want to commend the board majority, the recently elected board majority, for fulfilling your greatest responsibility, and that is representing the community. That's your job, representing the community. Fiscal, thank you. Fiscal responsibility should be one of your main concerns. Fiscal responsibility should have been a primary concern for your former award-winning superintendent. And how often have I heard that phrase, award-winning superintendent? I have one question. Who gave that award? I'd really like to know. But I will say this, that firing that award-winning superintendent was the first necessary step to restoring fiscal responsibility to this district where it is badly needed. I hope that the community that elected the board majority about a year ago will continue, I'll keep you here in your seats to continue to do the good work that you've been attempting to do this last year, in spite of and in the face of fierce, vocal, union-funded resistance. My understanding is they've just received from the union in Sacramento $55,000 additional dollars to make this recall campaign successful. Community members, pay attention. Who's really behind this recall? And board members, keep doing, majority board members, your responsibility. No on the recall.
Florida Sheldon, then Frances Marshall, and then Rosa Otero.
Hello, board. I just wanted to speak on the appointment of a committee to look into the evaluation of the facility usage. One of the things I just want to mention is that I would like the board to consider the backgrounds of those who would be appointed in that committee to ensure that they are well versed at looking at utilization of spaces. As one of the concerns I do have that we've seen throughout a lot of the meetings here is that there has been an alarming number of those within the teachers unions, which makes this public meeting more of a meeting that's geared towards vendors, right, third-party vendors and their employers, right? So I just want to make sure that when a committee selection is being considered, that there is a balanced representation with those within the community that do have a stake, as well as those who have a professional suitable background to determine the best for the usage of the space. Thank you.
Frances Marshall.
Good evening. My name is Frances Marshall. I'm from the South Bay Community Watch Group for Los Angeles County. I'm down here in support of Michelle Stevens, who is a teacher in your community. I just want to remind you guys that you guys are here to support and protect and teach our children. And it's best that you work with your community, because I want to tell you something that happened in Los Angeles. We had a charter school. very successful, many scholarships. Children in the beginning, when it first started, they were like, what's the Port of Los Angeles Charter School all about? It is one of the most successful charter schools and well sought after charter school in our county.
Just real quick, we're talking about the district asset plan.
Okay, I'm sorry. What I'd like to do is just encourage you to work with the school, the charter school, and open up your space, because this actually belongs to the community. The money that is paying your salary, the money that's coming in, is their money. It's we the people. And so I will be down here, and I will join forces with all the community in Southern California, all the way up to Sacramento. So I'm hearing wonderful things from some of you people on this board, and not so good for some. So I just want to encourage you to please do the right thing and open up your school and help the children and work together with your community. Thank you.
Rosa Otero. And that's the last card.
Hi, I'm back. My name is Rosa Otero. I am actually a concerned citizen today because I'm concerned about my property taxes. So I heard on October 19th what Mr. Rivera said, quote, including Orange, I've gone through the process with 4 districts to do a master plan. He went on and he says, it is a roadmap, what the community wanted. It allows us to be successful in passing bonds 3-4-3. I am concerned. We have a high population of elderly, we have inflation at the highest, and we are considering adding higher taxes to our already struggling population. I don't think this is right. There should be, and also, we have 100 million plus in property that can be sold. There are other ways to be fiscally responsible. It is a responsibility of this board to be able to use the money wisely, because we as voters, we can't afford it. We already have one Measure S, it was voted on, and at this point, you guys have $1 billion. $1 billion. This is the amount that needs for all Orange Unified Schools. So let's talk about, I understand the Esplanade parents are here. I want to direct, there was 395 kids that are in Esplanade district, yet only 155 attend Esplanade Elementary. That's a 39%. 39% of people voted with their feet. They said, I want to go to Esplanade. And I understand it's 55 people. But Knoll Canyon has 380 district kids, yet 338 kids are actually attending their own school at Knoll Canyon because they voted with their feet. That's an 89% attendance. So what does that tell us? It tells our constituents are voting with their feet. They're going where it matters. So what should we, Esplanade parents are saying, oh, this is racist. You guys are being racist to Hispanics. I'm a Mexican, you can't say that because I'm an immigrant myself. But did you guys remember Riverdale and Silverado elementary schools were closed and they're white schools, 100% white schools. This was in Anaheim Hills and this was in Silverado Canyon. A lot of the parents were very heartbroken. They tried to do many things. But at this point, what we need is for this dais to think of other ways to use the money wisely, because we homeowners, we can't afford it. And you definitely can't put this on the elderly and the people who are already struggling. If you look at the statistics with Biden inflation, we don't want Ericflation. We need to have the money here it be used correctly. And so that means to serve all of the residents. And as far as the $55,000 for California Teachers Union, this is not a grassroots recall. This is a union recall. That's what it is.
Okay, thank you. And on to our work study session facilities presentation. Mr. Gonzalez to Mr. Rivera to,
Yes, Mr. Rivera will be presenting on this item.
and as you can see, as the descriptors state, that the first one is going to be the legal issues, energy management, facility state matching program, and asset management. So show's yours, Mr. Rivera.
Well, I want to thank the board. Those of you that may not know me, I'm Dave Rivera. I'm the Deputy Superintendent and Chief Business Official for the district. We have 4 presentations for you tonight. I appreciate the board's interest in discussing topics of school facilities tonight in this special session. The 4 presentations are going to include energy management and conservation, which is going to consist of, this presentation consists of an outline of areas of the law that allow school districts to enter into agreements and what fiscal responsibility needs to demonstrate for the district to do so. Second, we're going to have an energy audit prepared and paid for by Anaheim Public Utility. The consultant that they hired is RHA, which they're here to present, and to share with the board the results of this 6 audits that were done in a series of recommendations and projected construction budgets, utility savings, potential one-time grants available to the district. The third presentation is going to be our eligibility for funding from state matching funds. The DLR group will be here to update the district, to update the board on the district plan and capturing facility funding for our schools. And the last presentation is going to be the asset management plus the surplus property process and requirements. This will entail a presentation on the facilities master plan with a series of recommendations necessary to continue to seek state matching funds, also discuss potential options for surplus, excess land that may be underutilized by the district. And lastly, our attorney, Mr. Yeoman, will be here to discuss the legal process for the surplusing of land. So let's get the presentation started. Mr. Yeoman.
Oh, good evening, everyone. First, I'm going to talk about the energy management, and it's been in effect in the state for over 50 years. And back in '74, the state first adopted the Public Resources Code that talked about to employ a range of measures to reduce wasteful, uneconomical, and unnecessary uses of energy, thereby reducing the rate of growth of energy consumption. And then 6 years later, they adopted and revised that policy slightly by adding to promote all feasible means of energy and water conservation and all feasible uses of alternative energy and water supply sources. Well, that's fine, the policy, but there really wasn't any mechanism to implement those policies, and that did not take place until 1986, when the energy conservation measures and of Government Code 4217 were adopted. And that finally there was a mechanism under which school districts would be able to enter into energy services agreements on an expedited way of doing things, and defines conservation measures to mean equipment maintenance, load maintenance techniques and equipment, or other measures to reduce energy use or make for a more efficient use of energy. And there's been all sorts of opportunities for this district to even utilize the energy services agreements through Prop 39, through a number of different funding sources, CalShape, whereby energy was being reduced, and at the same time there was independent funding sources being provided so the district could enter into these agreements without any form of competitive bid, albeit most of the time the districts will issue a request for proposals because you obviously want to make sure you get the biggest bang for your buck. Now, before the district can enter into any energy services agreement, the board has to make a couple findings, and those findings had to be made at a public hearing, after which at least 10 days notice has been provided. One, they have to find out that the agreement is in the best interest of the district to enter into it. Does it do what it touts it. Is it actually saving money? Is it saving energy? Is it helping the facilities? Is it helping the students? Is it giving a better environment for the students and its staff? And then the second is that they need to determine that the cost of implementing the particular measures will be less than what the cost would be to the district had those measures not be implemented. So if you didn't do anything, are you saving money or are you not? So they have to make those findings in order to enter into an energy services agreement. Now, those can also be done through different types of financing contracts. I mean, just like you had the Prop 39 and you had other kind of CalShape, other types of funding mechanisms. You can also look at federal funds. You can look at facilities leases and things that can be done, COPs, other types of certificates of participation in order to finance these where you're using funds other than just the local funds of the district. But when the energy project is financed, the board has to make the finding that not only is it in the best interest to enter into the financing agreement, but there will be energy savings that will offset what the district has to pay for those financing costs. And I've probably done 50, 60, 70 energy services agreements, maybe closer to 100 for a number of districts up and down the state. And it's been very, very successful. And it's more of a collaborative effort, so it's not the confrontational method that you have on your regular design bid build or design build or any other mechanism. So it's something where everyone's working together in order to achieve the ultimate goal of energy savings and energy costs. Another way is the power purchase agreements. That's another vehicle under the government code, and that's primarily where you're generating power. So if you're having carports with solar panels or ground mount solar panels, or you're putting it on rooftops of buildings, those are all potential opportunities where you can have private investment capital that's used to study what the effects would be, how much is it going to cost, pay for the actual construction of it. And so it's something that I worked very closely with LA Community College District some years ago, where they put solar on all 9 of their campuses, and on a number of other districts where they put solar panels, and quite successfully they've used the power purchase agreement. So that is something, another vehicle that can be done. Now, fee producing just means that the operation has to be paid for by the persons or entities who's benefited by the installation. So basically, the energy that's being generated, you're being paid for it, the district's paying for it. Some will have, if you're like LA Community College District, if you're using a carport or something, sometimes you can pay in order to park and utilize the solar, park underneath because it protects your car. At the same time, the district's saving money. So there's different vehicles, different mechanisms that can be used in order to fund that and to generate the fees. And unlike the energy services agreement, for the power purchase agreement, you do have to solicit proposals. But one nice thing is that in some of the cases, you have private entities that approach the district, say, we have something we think would work for your district. We've done some preliminary research, and I think that it's something that could be helpful. And the district can do that also. So it doesn't have to be generated and initiated by the district. It can be from the private party coming to the district with an idea that makes sense. So that's kind of a quick overview of energy services agreements. And so are there any particular questions on that at this point?
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you so
Ms.
much.
Erickson would like a question.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I just have thank you for the presentation. I have a quick question about Government Code 4217.12,
Yes.
which talks about how a lease can be entered into without a competitive bidding. And is that government code specific to this energy service policy? Or is that like I'm just curious about if that's just kind of a general concept that generally speaking, we should be utilizing these same sorts of ideas that we enter into the agreement that's in the best interest of the school district, that the anticipated cost will be less than existing cost, and that the difference, if any, between fair rental value of the property and agreed rent subject to the facility ground lease will be offset by the below market energy purchases. Is that specific to this particular policy, or does that government code apply to other areas as well?
No, it's only the energy conservation measures, and it's a requirement before the district can actually enter into the agreement.
Okay. Okay. And so when we do that, it is specifically pursuant to 4217.12. And then who makes those findings?
The board does.
Who does?
The board, based upon
Okay.
information that's, sometimes it's with the consultants, they're providing information showing what the energy savings will be, how much power is likely to be generated. And so it's usually very easy. Then the board basically adopts by resolution generally, making those findings, and it's done.
Is that subject to challenge in any way?
Well, everything's subject to challenge. But
there a
let's just say
procedure
I've
for
never
challenging?
encountered any challenges, only because it's a win-win. Because you're paying less energy and you're getting it at a good cost.
Sure. Okay. Okay. That was the only question I had on that. Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions? Okay. On to the next one.
So we started off with the presentation about energy management and what are the guidelines. Most of the board was not sitting at the board when the district entered into energy management programs in the past, and we're going to cover that in this presentation. So I thought it would be a good idea to provide information, background information for those new board members that hadn't participated in that process in the past. So then that way you could understand how the mechanics of energy management savings can be worked on. So this next presentation is going to be co-presented with me with Mr. Pareto, which is the consultant and senior director of RHA, which is the company, the firm that was hired by Anaheim Public Utility to prepare this analysis. So I asked him to, he's going to be joining me shortly. So let me just give you a little bit of background of energy management and what has happened in the district. So in the past, between 2006 and 2012, we had a number of projects that equaled about $23 million over 10 schools. Then with Prop 39, that was a grant that was provided districts. The district took action between 2015 and 17, and that was almost $7.5 million of projects for 21 schools. And then, of course, you're familiar with the solar projects that we've done since I've joined the district, that we have about 13 projects, and we have done power purchase agreements, and we've saved the district over a 25-year span approximately $13 million. So what we're looking at now is looking at an air conditioning replacement program, upgrading our lighting, and also replacing air conditioning units and lighting controls. And what's interesting as we study this, and we came across a study from Yale, and that's the diagram on the right-hand side. And what we're finding and what they're reporting in their study, and you have a link to that, and we made a copy of it in case you want to read I think it's a 75-page report, is that test scores increase for students once you do these upgrades. And specifically, we're looking at HVAC, plumbing, roofing. Those have a direct correlation to the test scores. What's also interesting is the work that is done to improve facilities that increase housing values. And the study reflects that typically within 5 to 8%, within 5 to 8 years, pricing values for the community increases about an average of 7%. And we're seeing that with our assessed values with the STEM centers. So there's a great correlation between improving facilities and improving the effects of students doing better in classes. And it all has to do with the interior of the classroom, what we're talking about tonight. So Mr. Prado, can you come up and talk about the report in your company?
Well, thank you for this opportunity, distinguished members of the board and here at the public too. Just to give you a little background of us, we are a company that started off working with disadvantaged communities over 40 years ago. And our main goal is just to work with students, disadvantaged communities, and we were not necessarily a technical company as we became later on during our tenure. We have over 25 engineers, energy efficiency engineers, and we work with school districts, we work with public utilities up and down the state, and all investor-owned utilities. And Anaheim hired us to do this specific study and to be able to find opportunities for energy efficiency improvement and also be able to create cost avoidance for the school district if they were to implement these energy efficiency opportunities. And that goes along with the previous presentation of energy efficiency and being able to actually create opportunities for cost avoidance. Now, we have all the different contractor licenses. We do energy management, construction management. We also work, like I said before, with public agencies. Next, please. And now let me talk about Anaheim Public Utilities, basically. So they hired us. Actually, we have a contract with them for over 5 years. We work with their commercial customers, schools being part of their commercial portfolio. So they asked us to work with with Orange Unified School District to be able to find energy efficiency opportunities and opportunities for them to provide Orange Unified School District with rebates and incentives if they were to do these projects. Now, in this, actually, what we ended up doing is we ended up doing 6 different assessments. As you guys can see, there were 6 sites that were assessed, and that was Anaheim Hills Elementary, have Canyon Hills, we have Canyon, Rim Elementary, Crescent Elementary, Imperial Elementary, Knoll, Canyon, and there's 2 sites that are currently being assessed. And these assessments actually are at not cost to Anaheim customers. This is paid by Anaheim Public Utilities. And there is different incentives that they have for all the potential opportunities for energy savings. As you guys can see to the right, there's different programs for different items that they can incentivize you with. Now, one interesting finding that we had is that over the 6 schools we assessed, we found out that most of your air conditioning units have passed their useful life, right? So right now, just imagine a car that you've driven over 200,000 miles. So what comes next? You got to replace the engine, you got to replace the transmission, you got to do a lot of work, right? And you think sometimes that you can afford to buy a new car. But once you do the math, right, eventually you realize that you probably should have taken a loan and would have ended up paying less for the new car if you did that. So right here, you have about 180 HVAC units that are old, past their useful life. You have over 6,700 lighting fixtures that are pretty old, past their useful life. And basically, the district spending a good amount of money on repairs, parts, changing all of these different types of equipment or trying to fix them and just keeping them alive, right? And also, in addition, the efficiency of the equipment that you have that is old decreases, right? Which increases your utility bills. Now, as you guys can see, what we try to do right there is we came up with a little table to summarize the study, right? There's a lot more details that you guys can be privy to, but bottom line is we classify the opportunities into two buckets, right, for all schools. We have the HVAC and we have the LED lighting and controls, right? As you guys can see in the first column, you know, if you were to implement our recommendations, you'll have a cost avoidance or savings of $106,000 for replacing all the HVAC equipment. You will have a cost avoidance of $148,000 if you were to replace all the LED lighting, right? And now let's translate that in terms of energy usage. You will save about 495,000 kilowatt hours. And for the HVAC, and you will save about 679,000 kilowatt hours on the lighting. And the demand piece too, which is an important part. Why we have demand and consumption is because your bills usually are split into two different charges, right? You have demand charges and you're gonna have consumption charges. And the reduction will be 651 kW for HVAC and 257 kW for the lighting. So with all that in mind, if you were to do all of those recommendations, Anaheim Public Utilities will be able to incentivize you with approximately $92,000 for the HVAC replacements and $125,000 for the lighting upgrades. And what we also did, we provided you with an estimated cost of doing all of these projects, right? What will it cost to do the HVAC projects? It'll be about $2.5 million, and the lighting will be $1.5 million. Now, we also did a quick calculation. We wanted to show you a return on investment just by the savings of the HVAC and the lightings. And as you guys can see, at the very end is, you know, the HVAC will usually pay itself back just with the savings in 23 years. Typically, HVAC will last you about 25 years. And the lighting will pay itself back in approximately 9.7 years, about 10 years. Typically, HVAC, you don't do it for the return on investment, right? You typically do it because you have to maintain good learning environment for the kids. So that was just something we wanted to put out there and for you guys to have an idea as to what would it take for us to do this. And that doesn't include anything other than the incentives from Anaheim. But on the next table, on the next slide, we're going to share with you that there's other funding opportunities, right? I'm sure many of you guys heard that bill that was pretty controversial, but it passed. It's the IRA, right? It's the Inflation Reduction Act, right? And it comes with about $1 trillion worth of money for infrastructure upgrades, right? And a big portion of that is being allocated for schools and universities and state entities of learning entities, right? And that money is going to be distributed being distributed in form of grants, direct pay to the school. If you do solar, for example, almost half of the solar cost could be direct pay back to the school district now. They have 0% loans. They have also transferability of tax credits for your consultants. For example, a consultant provides design services, right? The school can provide them a tax credit so the consultant can write off their own taxes and provide the school district a discount. So there's many ways in which these IRA funds are coming down the pike for schools and many other entities out there, including residential, including people that owns homes. State funding. State funding, the previous presenter went over and he talked about CalShape, right? So CalShape was a program that was implemented by the state, and you guys have participated on the first part of it, which is a study, which will become important for the next round of funding, right? So the next round of funding will be based on the study that you guys provide the state on the first round of funding. So then you have the utilities. As I show you guys, Anaheim will provide you, for the schools that are within Anaheim Public Utilities area, will provide you with incentives if you do the projects. SoCal Gas and SCE also have their own incentives, and they also have zero interest loans, right, for a certain amount of time and for a certain amount of money. What we also did here is we put a nice table to summarize the different funding sources that you guys can tap on, right? For example, again, Anaheim Public Utilities is a rebate. All you need to do is be a customer of Anaheim in good standing. You have the Energy Conservation Assistance Act, or zero interest loans, right? It's up to $3 million. However, right, these funds are so sought out that you have to get on the queue to be approved. So the sooner you apply for them, the most likely that you will get the funds. You have the Inflation Reduction Act, which is currently started about 6 months ago, but they're still studying the mechanisms under which they're going to distribute that money. Some are going to be managed by the IRS, some are going to be managed by the Department of Treasury, some are going to be managed at the state level. So there's many ways in which those funds are going to come for the school districts. So then you have so-called gas on-bill financing, which is basically a loan to do an energy efficiency project, and it's up to $250,000. And the payback needs to be less than 15 years. If it's more, the school district can find another source of funding for that payback to change. Same thing with so-called Edison. They have funding up to $1 million, right, per account. And you have to be in their territory, be a customer in good standing, and a maximum loan term for 10 years. And I'll pass it on to.
So we've walked you through a process of, that we've done an assessment, what the benefits of those assessment will provide us. That's in the first 2 bullets. But then the next 5 bullets, before we can proceed there, we need board direction and support to go after the free funding and to go after the support. So simply said, in our deferred maintenance plan, because many of the things that we're talking about today is deferred maintenance, is we're finding alternative funding. This does not impact our operational budgets. This does not impact the money that we supply the schools and their classrooms. This does not affect taxpayers with their tax bills. This is alternative methods of how to get the work done without taxing our community. So what we would like, in summary, it's going to improve the learning conditions at our Anaheim schools. It's going to bring lighting, air conditioning, things that we've already know that we need to do. That's part of our deferred maintenance plan. Mr. Pereira was right. We have some old equipment, and sometimes our staff members are spending a lot of time trying to find pieces, repair parts to that equipment, or that we have to cannibalize one piece of equipment to keep another piece of equipment going, which is really a waste of our time. So what we are interested in recommendations, is that we proceed with the study as it was the recommendations of the study. We seek a consultant that helps us in getting the funding. So there's a level of expertise in going after and getting funding. That's beyond the abilities that we have in staff here to do that, given our other responsibilities. We would provide an implementation schedule for the board if you were to do so. And we work with our attorney as to the delivery method. And what I mean by that is some of the costs that you heard tonight is related to Canyon High. And there's some available funds under Canyon High for Measure S. So we would want to do the analysis and bring back information, because of the $4 million that you saw up there, half of it was related to Canyon High. So we would like to see what our best strategy is. And the next presentation you're going to hear is about state matching funds. So we're looking at maximizing our resources and revenues. So that could be part of the strategy of how we move forward, is to see how we can benefit the most from doing these projects. And if there's other funding that we could stack on top of what we're getting to do more work for our schools.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, Mr. Rivera.
Got a-
Ms. Erickson?
Sure. I just wanted to sort of add some emphasis on the fact that these sorts of improvements, when we were going through the bond process, which, by the way, the bond was not $1 billion, was it? It was $288 million.
For our 4 high schools.
Okay. We actually have $1 billion worth of necessary improvements, things that we could be doing in the future if we had the money, correct?
And that was for our elementary and middle schools.
For the facilities master plan that we spent a couple of years having a committee introduced, that was adopted in 2021. But in terms of these improvements, which obviously are being done, they're going to save energy, they're going to save cost, but also the idea that students do better when you make these improvements, it was really, really clear. There's a whole bunch of literature and data on things like, just to make it very clear, lighting. Lighting in certain rooms, like frankly this lighting. When you sit here for students in a classrooms for multiple hours a day, you need really good lighting. Windows, having window space and natural light coming in is important. Things like our HVAC systems that are really loud because they're old. And so I know when my kids would sit in their rooms at El Medina and the air conditioner went on, it was so loud they couldn't hear the teacher at the front of the room. And so that's something that interferes with learning as well. The amount of space and the amount of fresh air in a room is really, really impacts how a student can learn, because that is basically, if all of us were forced to sit in an office that was tight with no natural light and was really loud, it would be really difficult to do our work. And so these are the kinds of things I just want, it isn't just that it's nice, it actually impacts performance for our students. And I think this is something we have to do, particularly if we can do it with, basically for free or to break even and get it done and not have to use any of our other money. So I appreciate this work and I appreciate this effort. And I think that it's something that we owe our students and owe our families, because we want to provide them the best opportunity to learn that we can. So I appreciate that.
I know the board knows this, but the community may not, is that this is leveraging projects that we cannot fund right now. So through ESSER funds, we're doing air conditioning replacements in some of our elementary schools. We're adding air conditioning at the gyms. They've never had air conditioning. So we've taken advantage of some of the funding sources that we had to provide more new air conditioners. So this is helping us address those schools that we don't have a plan for or a funding source.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I understand these are just our Anaheim schools anyways, but even so, wherever we can make those improvements, we need to do that. We need to take advantage of that opportunity.
Ms. Page?
I just want to add to that with improving our classroom air quality and comfort. It also improves our students' physical and mental health, because if they can breathe in a room, then that means less sick days and they'll be able to stay longer and be able to focus. Also, if I know that during some of our board meetings, we've also talked about some of our Anaheim schools not having everything, or the heater breaking down during the winter, or the AC not working over when school starts or school's ending. And having that sense of pride as a student that that's not only a school that they love because they love their teachers, but also that the facility is at the maximum that we're able to provide for them is also supports their learning. So I just wanted to add to that, because I know I'm grateful that you added the study in here in order to introduce the presentation about how we can improve our facilities. And that's another aspect that I've read in terms of elementary school children, but I'm sure it affects all students.
So you make a good point. Unfortunately, the state does not provide sick time for students. They provide sick time for employees. All employers are required to provide sick time for employees, but our kids don't have sick time. So if they're out of school because they're sick, that's approximately, depending on the grade level, you're looking at approximately $100 to $120 a day that we are not going to receive funding, even though we still have all the same operating costs. So by improving the air quality and minimizing any sick time that the kids are out, that helps us maintain funding, which means is that we don't have to use our reserves or we don't have to make budget cuts to make up for the loss of funding. Not because of loss of need, because of loss of funding.
Anyone else? Ms. Yamasaki?
Yes, thank you. I have a quick question regarding environment of the schools. I don't think it was really addressed. Things like trees and water, are those things part of any funding or requirements as part of the plan? For energy?
Not part of this report.
Okay.
But we can look and see what are the options and availability. And I think once we have a consultant that can help us seek funding, that could be something that we could pursue as well.
Because I know in Anaheim, they're really big, and I think in Orange too, they're big on providing trees for shade, conservation of energies, and just really a nice place for kids to.
Yeah, so prior to joining the district, I worked for 4 years in Anaheim, and I've used them. They're great partners to have. Trees, you're right, tree planting, also shade shelters for the carports. So all of those projects that I've used work with Anaheim Public Utility. They were a great business partner, and all of those were free to the district.
That's great. We got to get them over here. One of the things I also wanted to address, just capitalizing on what Chris had mentioned, is the lighting is so important. I know at Canyon High School, many of the classrooms were built without windows, where they just have a little window above the doors. And I can tell you that it made a big impact. People used to say how dark it was. The kids didn't feel like it was really good learning environment. And now with the new science building has made quite an impact on the way they feel in the classroom.
That's great to hear.
And just to kind of give you some backup information too, and thank you, Mr. Rivera, for the report. And, you know, obviously we're just looking here at Anaheim, you know, specifically versus the whole rest of the district, we'd have to hire, you know, for that. But as mentioned early on is we did start these projects back in '06. And we've been pretty proficient in doing this over this amount of time. And so it's not like we haven't approached this in any manner. So any of the public not having any of the backup knowledge that we've been through this process multiple times. And as you stated at the very outset, the majority of the board here hasn't been through this process at all. And so I've been through this multiple times, and it's a fairly seamless process to go through. You could look at everything, but once you hire the consultant, you do your assessment, we approve the assessment, you would provide the RFP, and we just go from there to see who's going to give us the best rates. And also mentioned too is, was some of you familiar with the Williams settlement? We did tackle seven of our sites as well, 7 or 8, I can't remember. Anyway, it was in that neighborhood that we did basically rebuild the school from the studs out. So those schools have been, you know, fairly redone, basically with brand new. So again, when we talk about these things, let's not make it sound like we haven't done anything. We've been doing things here since '06 and upgrading our facilities, upgrading our lighting, our HVACs. I remember the first go around, especially when we had to get McPherson started again. You know, they didn't have any air conditioning in their multi-purpose room. And that was one aspect there. So there's many different ways when we looked at this to do the upgrades. So I commend staff for continuing to look at this and how we can continually improve from the foundation we've already established and built over all these years. And so, yeah, I mean, in fairness, I would say I don't know, we're missing 2 board members currently, but, you know, what are you looking for just to, a general consensus to move forward on the process and.
You move forward in the process. Let me just,
Yeah,
I'll be
I'm
happy to come
at
back
the
and,
recommendation.
and as you know, I'm always happy to do presentations. So,
Really?
so
You
I'll
don't
be happy
say.
whether it's at work or at home, it doesn't matter to me. But to pursue, because we have to come back and get board approval.
Right.
But for us to start the process, and especially since some of these grants are competitive, you know, I'm a very competitive person because I always want to be in front of the line, that we start pursuing and getting the funding, because I think that's the first key, is securing funding and then working on the projects. So then that way we can bring that back to the board.
One of the questions I would ask is this is also going to include the rest of our schools.
Well, this right now is for the Anaheim Public Utility, so it's only the schools within Anaheim.
So
We would need to start a process with Southern Edison because we don't know what programs they have in place and to what extent. So
Right.
those are things that we would have to pursue with the Edison related sites.
Correct.
But we thought at least to start with Anaheim and to take the low-bearing fruit and run with it.
Sure. The rest of the colleagues? See shaking heads up and down.
And we would bring back reports, give you updates. You're going to see the contract, so there's going to be continuous conversations with the board on this project.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good project. Once they get to see it in action, it's actually pretty seamless. You know, when you look at the totality of it all, I mean, this looks, you know, pretty detailed, which it is and it should be. But what I'm saying is, once you start to get the process going, then you get to see it in action. Next, thank you.
So besides spending money, I like talking about how we're going to generate money. So we have our team here, which is the DLR group, and I'll let them present. We've had a working relationship with this team for a number of years. You're going to see the results of that working relationship. Tonight is a sad night for me because one of our teammates is going to be retiring at the end of this month. But the team is here to continue with the work and to continue getting us money, which is obviously, it's not getting the district money, it's doing services for our students. So I'll let Julie and the team introduce themselves.
Thank you, David.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here, and I think this is probably our third presentation to your board. I want to remind you that I'm a product of Orange Unified School District education. I attended El Medina High School, lived at Yorba and Fairhaven, and I'm a Vanguard true and true. So, and I go to all the reunions and everything. It was a great time in my life in high school and middle school and elementary. All right, so we are the Education Funding Services team at DLR Group. Our role is to work with school districts to maximize funding through the state program. We worked with school districts around the state and captured $2.3 billion for school projects, including new construction modernization, seismic projects, facility hardship, career technical education, etc. We are state funding experts. Regina previously was with the Office of Public School Construction. I'm sorry I didn't introduce the team. This is Regina Bills Dacong and Kate Vega. We're a very strong workforce in the company. We work closely with our architect teams, and when you hire your architect teams, we work one-on-one with them as well. Let's see, next slide. So the school facility program was established in 1998 with the passage of SB 50, which became a law called Proposition 1A. School facility projects in California are funded by voter-approved statewide school bonds. The first one that was authorized was SB 50. Most recently, there was one in 2016 that was Proposition 51 that school districts are still obtaining some money from. But virtually most of that money is starting to vanish. Next slide, please.
Can we
This
just
is
return to that point really quick? Because people don't understand.
Okay.
A lot of times that facilities, we don't receive money for facilities as a general rule. So repeat that these matching funds come from what?
voter-approved statewide school bond measures.
Right, and
So
that-
your property taxes don't fund school facilities.
Correct. And local bond measures would be an assessment that would affect the tax base. In our case, I think it's $29 per 100,000 or something like that.
We're going to share with you that the way to get money from the state is they have the statewide bond money and any other money that the governor might put in recently, like you did with general fund money.
Mhm.
But districts can get money from the state by providing a match. And typically it comes from local bond, developer fees, and other things like that that David is used to.
Or other capital improvement projects that we do. Right. Thank you.
Sure. So Proposition 51 is much like the previous bond measures were. They're basically new construction, modernization, career tech, charter schools. There was some previous bonds that provided for funding for critically overcrowded schools. But basically, we are working under the school facility program right now with the extra general fund money that the governor put in. There's about $3 billion left. Next slide, please. And Kate's going to talk to you about the future bond.
The next bond, which we just thanks Julie. So right now, there are 2 statewide bonds on the governor's desk, and one is AB 247. That's by Senator Marichucci, that's for $14 billion. It's a TK-12 and community college bond. And the other one is SB 28, which is sponsored by Glacier. The main difference between these 2 bonds is that the Glacier bill also includes funding for facilities for UC and Cal State universities. The most support currently is for AB 247. We should know that right now there are negotiations between the House and the Senate and the governor as to which one will move forward. We're hoping it's AB 247, same with most of the organizations that support and school districts throughout the state of California mostly are for AB 247. The biggest difference that we will see is this bill also includes some funding for minimal essential facilities, which would be your libraries, multipurpose rooms, gymnasiums, whether they may be undersized or lacking from your school sites. There is funding in there for those sorts of facilities. Next slide. So I'm going to kind of briefly walk through, and we'll elaborate more as we go through our presentation. And there's a handout, I believe, that has some of these acronyms that may help that you, okay. The first agency that we work with is the California Department of Education, CDE. We also work with the Division of State Architect, DSA, OPSC, which is the Office of Public School Construction, and then the State Allocation Board, which is the SAB. So let's start with the California Department of Education. So the California Department of Education, their main role with schools is to make sure that there's safe school sites. They're looking at parking lots, drop-off, they're looking to make sure that there's visibility on campus. They're basically under Title V, which is the regulation that they operate under, make sure that our school sites are safe for kids, whether you're doing modernizations or new construction, that the plans that have been approved by DSA also meet Title V. That process includes providing drawings and then also a form in Orange's Unified School District's case, probably modernization, which would be a 408. There's about 3 months from when we submit the application for funding to when we get our final plan approval. The next step in the process is, what actually sort of happens concurrently is DSA. That's where we work with your architect that's on the project to make sure that Title V is included in those drawings, and DSA is looking for structural, fire life safety, and accessibility. They're governed under Title 24. Once you have approval from CDE and DSA, you get to go to OPSC, which is the Office of Public School Construction. They serve as staff to the State Allocation Board. The OPSC looks to make sure that you've met all of the criteria necessary to get state funding. And then they also look to make sure that you're spending the dollars that you receive from the state in the appropriate manner. Finally, the last step in the process is the SAB. They just had their monthly meeting today, approving projects for under the TK program and a couple of other programs. They are a 10-member board. Of note on the board is Tony Thurman, the state superintendent. And then there's 2 new members of the board that I'd like to point out. One is Assemblymember Maritucci, who, if you remember, is sponsoring AB 247. So that's going to be great because they'll have more hands-on understanding of how school facilities work in our state. And then also a new member who just joined us today for the first SAB meeting is David Alvarez, who is also was just appointed to lead the state budget committee number 3, which is one that is where school facilities funding comes through. So he'll also have a better and more firsthand knowledge of how schools are funded in our state. I think next slide is Regina.
Thank you. So Kate just walked you through the various state agencies that are involved in the approval process as projects go through the various reviews and how they get approved and then eventually funded as they go through the state allocation board. As you can imagine, it can be a very complicated process. There's lots of different criteria that have to be met for each agency as you go through the various approval processes, and there's a lot of thought that goes into this as well. And so Orange, go ahead.
Can I ask you to speak closer to the mic?
Oh, sure.
Thank
Is that
you.
better?
Yeah.
Okay. One of the things that Orange should be very proud of is you have demonstrated the fact that you are very intentional and thoughtful about how you approach your school facilities, and that comes through as we look at the planning efforts that are typically included before you even get to the state agencies, things like capacity studies, looking at site utilization, looking at your master planning. Those are all things that you guys have actively been doing, and they really help you to have a very educated and thoughtful process as you move forward with these various projects. So we wanted to commend you for that. One of the other things that comes up often as we talk about school facilities, and we've talked about tonight, is funding and your budgets and your availability for funding and maximizing that wherever you're able to. We work very closely with the district to ensure that we are going out and looking for funding that can help with your facility projects to ensure that you maximize your local funds and grow them so that you can really maximize what you're able to do at each of your campuses. I'm going to talk mostly about the modernization program because there is a new construction program in the state school facility program, but because the district has been having declining enrollment over the years, it really hasn't been able to generate the eligibility to be able to participate in that. You have been very active, though, in the modernization program. So I wanted to talk about how that works in a little bit more detail. Basically, the program is based on a site-by-site analysis. So every school site has its own eligibility, and it's done at one point in time. So the program requires a snapshot, essentially, of each campus. And based on that snapshot, we look at the ages of your buildings. If it's permanent and it's 25 years or older, it generates modernization eligibility. Similarly, if it's a relocatable building and it's 20 years or older, it also generates eligibility. As your buildings become of age, we update your eligibility so that you're always having the most recent eligibility available to you. You can see we've done a current assessment of current modernization eligibility across the school sites in the district, and we're looking at about approximately $140 million available to you right now. One of the things that's really wonderful under the MOD program is the fact that when you have facilities that are 50 years or older, they actually generate additional funding for you. And that's something that we look at very closely on your campuses. You have a number of campuses with facilities that are 50 years or older. This also allows you to go in and ask for additional funding for utilities upgrades, which can be very costly. And this gives you additional funding to specifically address that on those campuses. You can see that Orange has been very successful in the school facility program since its inception in '98. As of last month, the district has been able to garner $90.5 million in funding from the state, which is something to be extremely proud of. The majority of that has been in the MOD program.
Since 2006, when we began working for Orange Unified School District and capturing state funding, we've garnished over $70 million. This is an example of many of the school sites that have been funded. It shows mostly mod. There was one project for new construction prior to my time that was from 2002, and I believe there might be some more on the next page. Yes. So this shows you way back to 2000. Remember, the program started in 1998, and there was a lot of paperwork that was required for districts to submit to the state because they had to show what was happening at every single one of their campus in terms of the age of the facilities and what's going on in each classroom. So it took about 1.5 years for most districts to get through that first submittal, and so you can see how aggressive Orange Unified School District's been in the past. Okay, so this is Orange Unified is sitting here between Santa Ana and Capistrano. Orange Unified in the fiscal year 22-23 obtained over, I'm trying to read the slide, 37 million compared to Santa Ana and Capistrano. That's a lot of money, and that's great for Orange Unified. Next slide.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about your high school projects and how we've been working with the district to ensure that we're really maximizing your Measure S funds. Sorry. So you'll see that we've done an analysis of funding that has been received at each of the campuses and then also remaining potential eligibility for modernization moving forward. At El Medina, we have gone in and actually captured all funding available and eligibility available at that campus, and most of that was used recently for the athletic field improvements. You'll also see that at Orange and Canyon and Villa, we've been very active getting funding for the district for the Phase 1 projects. We're now looking at what we can do to capture funding for you on your Phase 2 projects. And our goal, as David has said, is to really ensure that we're maximizing your local dollars and really expanding that with the use of the state funding to make sure that we can get as large as funding as possible for your projects.
So, are you taking questions as we go, or should I wait? No, go ahead. Is that okay? I was looking at, I'm going to go back a couple pages because I didn't see it on here. I was noticing that El Rancho did some recent construction, but they didn't qualify for any matching funds.
This is correct. There was a charter school program because that would be what what El Rancho, which I went there too, which is what they could have captured funding for, but it was based on priority points. And one of those points is financial hardship, and you're not a financial hardship district. So there weren't enough points to fund the gym. Are you talking about the gym project?
They have a science building and a gym, and yeah.
Yes, we did try.
Okay. I just wanted to double check that. Sure. Thank you.
I think we're going to the elementary schools. So Orange is in good shape. This slide here shows you in green those schools that are over 50 years. Regina mentioned previously that through the the modernization program, you can get funding for facilities that are over 50 years of age, extra money, as well as money for infrastructure, for utilities, to expanding the utilities to those overage buildings. This shows you that there's availability of $79 million for the elementaries. A district match, remember, it's 60-40, and that's not 60% of the total project budget. It's 60% represents what you're eligible for. Okay, it's all a mathematical calculation. Just wanted to make sure you realize that. The next slide is going to show you the middle schools and the high school eligibility for modernization. We're looking at $13 million for the middle schools and $47 million from the state for the high schools. Again, the green shows the overage 50-year buildings. And this is a grand total of $140 million you have in terms of eligibility for modernization. We know that in order to get the funding, you need to have CDE approval, you need to have DSA approval, you also have to have eligibility for modernization. But as David always says, if it's free, it's for me, because that money's out there and it's available for school districts. Timing is everything, so we want to make sure that upon DSA approval, that's last usually the last step. We're up to OPSC with funding applications. So I think now we have preschool.
I think the reason we wanted to really talk about this program is because it really shows how Orange has been such a good steward of the funding available. And while we haven't captured funding yet in this program, we've applied twice into this program. The first slide, so let me just step back one little bit. This program is also funded based on priority points, a little bit different than what Julie was speaking of earlier, in that they give priority points first to a district that's financial hardship. You get 40 points right out the door. Then the next way to get points is based on your free and reduced lunch percentage. And I think I'd like to say that your district has done an amazing job of really capturing more students that would fall underneath that program. And so your free and reduced lunch percentage has increased from, I think it was 57 to 60%, which would now garner you some points in the program. As you can see from the first graph, the first 2 years of the program, so round 1 and 2, were strictly full-day kindergarten facilities. The second 2 rounds, 3 and 4, included preschool and TK facilities. This last round, which was just given the last bit of apportionment this evening at the State Allocation Board, we saw that because the pot of money was bigger, that more districts like yours who would have fewer priority points got funded. So only 41% were financial hardship, which is, I think, promising because, as we all know, there are a lot of districts that need funding for facilities for our littles. And with the greater pot of money, the more funding that's available. And then the second one just shows how much funding round 4 has doled out. And actually that number needs to be changed because I think 28 million was given out today. And next slide. This is a comparison of round 3 and 4. Again, we, Orange Unified, did submit applications in round 3 and 4. And while we weren't funded, we did notice that the free and reduced lunch percentage went down. So the lowest number was 77.4% free and reduced lunch. I believe Orange right now sits at 60. So while this program right now, the funding has been delayed by the governor, there's $550 million that we're hoping will come back in not this year, but the following year that we hope will put back from the general fund.
So I just want to go back to one slide. So when Measure S was passed in November of 16, there was a commitment that we were going to go after state matching funds, and I think the number that was used about 60 million. Year to date, we've pulled in 37 million. That was last year. That's the number that was discussed earlier. We're right now working on these gray bars to bring in funding. So what we do as a team, we sit down, look at the drawings, look and see how we can structure our application to get more money for the district. So we're number 2 in the county, not by accident, because we've been doing a lot of work with the assistance of this great team behind me to get our additional funding. We've done work at the schools that we're going to recapture and put in an application. For example, when we did the roofing project at Orange High in the gym, that was an $800,000 roof. We didn't go through DSA because it was a maintenance project. We didn't have to go through DSA. Now we're doing the gym. Now that we're doing the gym under the ESSER programs, we're going to capture the roof. So now we're going to get 60% of that $800,000 back, or that's our intent. So we're being very deliberate about the applications we file to make sure that we get all the money that we're entitled to, because some districts, quite frankly, don't file applications. So if we don't file applications, then someone else will, and they'll get the money. And remember, I'm very competitive. I don't allow that to happen. But I think overall, it's for the board to understand what monies we have available, because I think that can guide us in decision making. Because if we can get 60% of our money back in some fashion, I'm always looking for those opportunities, because then we can take that money and use it again for other projects. So what you have here is the dollar amounts that are out there. In fact, the dollar amounts that we, excluding Richland, we're looking at about $43 million of matching funds for the high schools that we're going to be pursuing. All of it or whatever we can qualify for. So,
Any questions? Ms. Erickson?
What was the percentage for new construction? So won't Villa Park be a new construction for the new building?
When you, So the modernization program allows you not only to touch buildings, but also if you have buildings that you want to get rid of and replace them, that's eligibility under the state program. For Canyon, I know we went in and we did something with the kitchen. I think we moved the kitchen to the other. So that qualified for modernization. The football field at Fred Kelly, that was a brand new field. And the press box or the food area, the restrooms and all that, that was part of the funding too. So that we used up all the money at Fred Kelly. But good question, because it just doesn't sound logical.
Right.
But the state believes that if you're replacing portables, which is a lot of projects that we do, you can get money through the state program for modernization, if you have modernization eligibility.
And so, and just to be clear, so the public understands, you have to be willing to invest money in order to, I mean, this isn't money anybody will give us. We have to be willing to make the investment in these projects in order to get it, secure it. And just to emphasize, we are not a district in financial hardship. So that dings us, but it's good news that we're not a district in financial hardship. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Yamasaki?
I did want to clarify that too, the financial hardship part. So because we were good stewards of our monies, we don't qualify. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, are you saying? So it has nothing to do with the socioeconomic levels of our district. It's just because.
Yeah, there's a number of criteria the district would have to be able to demonstrate in order to qualify for financial hardship. Some of it has to do with your bonding capacity, has to do with how much availability you have in your funding. Because you have been successful in passing a local bond, it is a little bit of a catch-22, like you said. So that takes you out of being able to demonstrate eligibility for financial hardship.
Okay.
Really
and I want
not that many districts across the state that are considered financial hardship.
Okay, that's good to hear. That.
All the county office of ed, I mean, they get 100%, but
Okay. I want to go back to the slide that Mr. Rivera had up regarding the matching funds. I see that in El Medina, we have received all of our funds. Is that part of Fred Kelly Stadium? Is that calculated into the El Medina funds?
Yes.
Okay.
I believe it was 17 million, and that's pretty, I think we were eligible for like 17.5 million.
And what about the current construction going on at El Medina now? Do we anticipate having more matching funds for that?
Not until the buildings become of age again in 25 years or 20 years.
Okay. All right.
You mean do you mean phase two? I think she's
Yeah.
talking about phase two.
Yeah, we actually exhausted all of the eligibility that was currently available for the campus. So we don't have any for phase two projects at
And
this time.
so because Fred Kelly Stadium is tied in with them, they used all their eligibility because of Fred Kelly, which benefits actually the entire district, not just El Medina.
Yes.
Okay.
So you can use that money on any high priority capital improvement project that's modernization eligibility type work. So you can't use it to show the state that you're spent the money on new square footage, right? Because that's new construction. So as long as it's like for like, air conditioning, all
Okay.
of those things that we've been talking about today, that's eligible for modernization funding.
So
at
that
other
money right
campuses.
now sits in a reserve fund, correct?
Yeah, so let me give you a little bit of background. When the state gives you money for state matching funds, that's called Fund 35. When we sell local bonds that the voters pass, that's Fund 21. So there's two different funding sources.
Right.
So we had a decision to make when I first arrived. Do we wait until the STEM center is built Or do we go after a project that is being worked on that we can get funding immediately? So I made the decision, let's get the funding that we can get, because I don't know what's going to happen and when they're going to happen and when we're going to receive the funds. So Fred Kelly Stadium, $17.5 million. It's sitting on the El Medina property. So that reimbursement used all the eligibility for the campus.
Okay.
But it got us the money earlier than if we would have waited for the STEM Center or other projects. You know, we still may be waiting for some of that money right now.
Okay. So when we passed Measure S, and we had talked to the voters about getting additional funding, state matching funds, and that was one of the reasons why we convinced the voters that this is a good thing, because like you said, if you don't invest, you don't get the matching funds, and we're losing out money that could be going to us to other districts, right? And we have done that in the past. We didn't pass bonds soon enough, and so we lost out on some monies, correct?
Correct.
So that money is supposed to go to our elementary and our middle schools, correct? Because we had talked about during the, when we did Measure S, that those monies were going to be earmarked for other projects.
Yeah, I wasn't here at the time for when Measure S was being passed, but I have heard that statement that the matching funds were going to be used for or the intent of the matching funds was for the elementary. That's what I was told.
Well, Trustee and Erickson was part of the committee, and I were part of the committee that put the bond forward. So we worked extensively on trying to convince the voters that this is the reason why we needed to do this, and that the monies was going to go to the elementary and the middle schools. So I just want to make sure that that's clear.
Anyone else?
I actually have one more question, if that's okay. Are there projects that don't qualify for matching funds? When I say, I know there's projects that don't qualify, but for instance, our Villa Park pool, will that be something that will qualify for matching funds since it's technically upgrade, or it would be sort of like the building, right? You're tearing something down and putting something new.
Yes, so that would be an eligible expenditure under the modernization program.
Okay, and what is that percentage the same? Is it 60% versus 40%?
Yes, so the eligibility assumes you are able to use, so it's generated by the site and by the buildings on the campus, but it can be used anywhere on the campus. So you could take eligibility that's generated by buildings and divert it to the pool modernization if you would like to do that. The project will dictate, and the scope of the project will dictate how much money you're able to get from the state. The 60% match will look at the construction cost, and then we'll look at the total project cost and then use that to back into the 60% the state is willing to chip in toward the project, and then they'll ask that you do the 40% match for that.
When you say they'll back into it, what does that mean? Are there certain things like buildings that are reimbursed or matched, but other things that are not? Or what does that mean?
So when I say back into it, what I mean is we're looking at the actual project cost, and we compare that to the eligibility. So you may have more eligibility at the site, but if the project only costs a portion of that, we can only go in and ask for the amount that the portion will qualify for.
Okay, so what do we qualify for on that campus now?
So we're just above 15 million in eligibility at that campus right now.
And that will encompass phase 2 and the new, okay, so we may run out of eligibility.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're looking at all the projects to see what we can show will qualify under the program, and then we're going in and asking for funding on that as quickly as possible.
So, okay, so just so I understand, there's a total of $15 million in eligibility that we have left.
Mm-hmm.
That will probably be eaten up by Measure S, more than likely, because it's site by site.
Yes.
Okay, so once we run out of eligibility, that's it. We could do 100 more projects at Villa Park. We're not going to get a penny more.
Absolutely. Until you have additional facilities generate more eligibility.
Got it. So
that's
then
kind of
if
what
we go
happened in El
to,
Medina?
pardon me?
That's what happened
That's what happened at El Medina. That was basically what you said, is that we used up all of our eligibility.
Your current eligibility, yes.
So we don't qualify for anything else, no matter what we do
Not
there
at
right
the
now.
moment. Not at the moment,
Okay.
yeah.
So if we move to another campus, let's say, I don't know, just make up McPherson, and we haven't
and we have money that's eligible, we meet that amount. So if we make improvements at McPherson, then we'll get money in matching funds because we haven't met the threshold yet. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
So the way, just to make sure that everyone understands how to read these reports. So I'm going to use Anaheim Hills as an example. So Anaheim Hills, if we do $5.8 million worth of projects, the state is required to, the state is going to give us 3.5. We will have to have our match of 2.3. For cash flow purposes, we have to have the entire amount and then get reimbursed because it's a reimbursement program. So we have to have these funds available. But eventually, we're going to get 60% of the funds back. So when you look at these numbers at the bottom, technically, we're going to be spending 52 million, and we're going to get 79 reimbursed back. But we have to have the liquidity of 132 million. Just looking at the grand total.
Any other questions? Okay. So you mentioned some of these projects and some of them that have already
My
been.
mic on, sorry, Mr.
Oh.
Ortega. Can I go
Oh.
after you?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So that was mainly my question, was how to read this chart about what would qualify. The question I had about facilities was the pie chart. And with the state facilities grant program, was that mainly to refurbish restrooms, or is that everything else potentially like outdoors as well?
This program where the pie charts was specifically for the California Preschool TK full day kindergarten program. So you had to qualify within that program. So that was modernizing kindergarten facilities or converting classrooms into transitional kindergarten classrooms, because the Title V requires, if you're getting funding under the state, that you need to have 1,350 square foot classrooms that include a restroom within for all TK, preschool, and kindergarten students. So this is specific to that program.
Okay, so for our district, for example, our TK moved into our kindergarten classrooms, and then our kindergarten moved into our first grade classrooms.
Yes.
So would those funds also be allocated to be able to refurbish the first grade classrooms to
Yes,
fit for kinder?
Yes, ma'am. If we were able to capture funding from this program, you would have been able to submit a project. It was one project per district that got funded, just because of the limited amount of funding. But you would have been able to convert those first grade classrooms. Typically, 3 standard classrooms would be converted into 2 either kindergarten or TK classrooms. That was available.
And then would our CDC also qualify, or no? Our Child Development Center over at Parkside?
Oh, preschool program, sorry. Yes, preschool classrooms would have also, it would have had to been, again, one project on a campus. So if it was one of your elementary schools, you would submit one project under the program.
Okay, so have we completed this? Is the grant over?
It is. We're hoping that, this is what we're hoping that we'll get. It's been delayed $550 million to go back into this program. And because of districts like Orange Unified, they showed a huge demand for this kind of funding, because the lovely thing about this program is it did not touch your district eligibility. So you could have gotten new construction funding under this program, whereas otherwise you would not have been able to. It also, that same holds true for your modernization. It would not have depleted your modernization eligibility. So hopefully the governor will put that money back into the pot, and we'll go after another project.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Couple questions is, this looks great, to look at the sites and the numbers associated with it and how to approach it. But those numbers would be basically to gut the school and build brand new?
No, you wouldn't be required to gut it. You would be
No,
required
I'm saying these numbers right here that you're showing us.
Of the eligibility.
No. It says right here, for example, California would cost us $8.6 million.
Oh, you'd have to have a significant project, yes.
So you're basically going to gut the school, is what I'm saying.
You could. You don't have to, but yes, you could.
But that's what this is insinuating that we were to do.
And
It's
to
yes or
be
no.
clear, you don't have to use the entire amount. You could ask for a portion of it.
No, I understand. I guess it's more for Dave. Is these numbers that you're saying total cost, that is to gut the entire school, correct?
Well, this is the
Hold
eligibility.
on a second.
This is
This
the
is-
eligibility that's been calculated. But to get to these numbers, in some cases, you wouldn't have to gut the whole school. You could be doing, depending on the projects.
I understand. I guess I'm not putting it crystal clear. This total number right here to the far right would include gutting the school and building it from new. Yes or no?
No, you couldn't. These numbers here would not be able to do a complete modernization to the site.
Okay.
Inflation has risen to a point.
Inflation's out of control. We know
Yeah,
that.
these dollar amounts would have to be very conservative projects. So you would have to be very isolated in what you do. You wouldn't be gutting the school.
Right, like we did at the 7 schools for Williams.
Correct.
So that's what I'm alluding to. So part of the ESSER projects that we're doing, is that going to bring eligibility as well?
I believe it will. That's what we're working on, looking at.
And how many
So-
projects are those, again, roughly?
We have 6 HVAC replacements, 6 elementary schools. We have 4 projects at the gyms regarding new gyms and air conditioning. We have shade shelters at 33 sites, I believe.
I mean, it's just-
Restrooms
Right.
throughout the district. Yeah, so overall, I think we're in the $10 to $15 million range
Correct.
for the ESSER projects.
And so there's eligibility. I'm looking at the 3 ladies here.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what,
Okay.
we're working on commission, so the answer is yes.
Okay. Okay, so I just want people to understand that. Plus, we do a lot of deferred maintenance projects every single year. And we do in the realm of, what, 10 to $12 million a year?
We've been averaging probably 10 to 15.
So
Or more?
10 to 15 million, and we've been doing that for probably the last, what, 5-6 years at least?
I think since 2016,
So
we've done over $132 million.
Right.
So it's
It's significant.
some years more than others, but yes.
Correct. So what I'm alluding to is some of these numbers here, because of a lot of the ESSER projects we're doing, a lot of the deferred maintenance projects we've been doing, as you just stated, over $120 million worth of projects that we've been doing at the school sites. So I want the public to understand that we haven't been negating our responsibility to the other sites, in that we're going after and prioritizing in those areas all of those needs at all those different sites. And so I want there to be understanding that that has been a priority for us for 7-8 years now, since this has began. In even prior projects, and I keep bringing up the Williams, our previous facilities individuals they were hard chasers of money, and they went after that money vigorously. And that's why we were able, I think we were one of the first districts for the Williams settlement as part of that. And that was a lot of money. And then to seek matching funds as well. So I want there to be understanding that we're not negating our responsibility. We're actually out there on good footing that we're doing this. And so, so out of those ESSERs and deferred maintenance every single year, we can seek reimbursements on those as well.
So you have to have eligibility in the state program, and you have to have DSA-approved plans. And I think a lot of districts, their maintenance projects don't go through DSA.
Right. Okay. Most of ours.
Many of our projects are going through DSA.
Right. Yeah, and it's for that reason.
Let me just clarify another point. There's a minimum requirement that DSA, that needs to be done at a site for us to have a reimbursement. So if we did a project for $200,000, we can't file a reimbursement for that. So we're looking at between 600,000 to 700,000, depending on the grade configuration. So we have to capitalize these projects and strategically look at what we're going to do at a site. So we simply can't get reimbursed for a shade shelter because that's not going to reach the threshold. But if we combine that work with, let's say, a roof replacement, then we have a reimbursement.
Correct. Yeah, I think most people, I don't know if they do understand the whole reason behind Fred Kelly. It's not that we wanted to spend that money, it was a need there, but we were under our Office of Civil Rights for many years because of that, because we had one complaint against us. And the feds basically said, you're gonna build us a new stadium. And we said, well, where's the money? And we kept arguing with them for years about that. So we were finally able to capture that money. Unfortunately, Fred Kelly is tied to El Medina land, therefore the money gets utilized there, even though it encompasses for all the schools to utilize it. So it's still a win-win for everybody in that nature. But yeah, I mean, you know, this is great. It's promising. You've done great, you know, going after the dollars, the reimbursements. You know, a lot of this looks good too, but until there's money to match, we're not going to get it. And if the state's already, what, 20, what did we hear, 26 billion in the rear, in the red, they're really not going to be flush with cash anytime soon. So we have to balance that all out with being realistic at the same time. And I think our next presentation is going to lead us into, you know, our asset management and seeing how do we maximize our assets, our facilities, and for our students. And then where do we then shift those dollars into those appropriately? So, you know, you don't want to jump ahead of yourself in that manner. So at least we can now have an understanding how it works. But now we look at how's this asset management, what is it going to look like? And how do we maximize our facilities for our students? So anyway, I want to thank you,
Can I follow up to that really quick? Can I follow up? Because I just want to clarify on, I have a question about that now that you've asked that. Do you mind?
Go ahead.
On page 22, the next page. So is that why where it says Portola, Yorba, and El Medina, it's blank? Because we've already received our maximum amount, right? So when you go back to the page before that, when you look at, let's just say, California Elementary School, we have a total eligibility of 8.6 million. But let's say we go to our facilities master plan, and on our facilities master plan, it says we have $2.6 million worth of projects. We go ahead and we do that, and then we get whatever we're eligible for, right? And then we still have some in the pot, as long as there's still money out there to be used. But it doesn't mean that we have to spend $8 million. It means that we spend whatever it is that we need, but we know that there's money there to match it. Whereas the 3 schools that don't have money to match are the 3 schools that we've basically already received those reimbursements for, right? Okay. Okay.
And usually the big pots of money go to where? LA Unified.
To where?
So that's the conversation every time. Well, LA Unified gets it all. Ah. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it, ladies.
I still have another question, I'm sorry.
Go
If you
ahead.
don't mind, thank you. You had mentioned that we did $132 million worth of deferred maintenance projects, and how many years was that over again?
So last year when we did a facility, a year ago, we did a facility presentation. And we had a video, and I believe it was 132 million, and it was from 2016 to 2022.
So 2016 to 2022, so that's about 6 years. So that means we have 40 sites approximately. That means we spent $3 to $4 million on each site.
If you look at it in that.
Yeah, I'm just doing an average, right? So even though $132 million sounds like a lot of money, but when you spread it amongst all the schools over 6 years, you're really not talking about a lot of money per school. You're talking about less than $1 million per site.
So
And this is for,
In the next presentation, you'll see how much acreage we have.
uh-huh.
I didn't include square footage of buildings, because I think in square footage of buildings, we're probably at 3 million square feet of classroom space, office space.
Right.
And we, just for the school sites that are in operation, we have over 600 acres.
Well, so,
So
yeah.
we're a large district.
Right. So my point is, even though it sounds like a large amount of money, being that we are a large district and being that we have a lot of needs, it seems to me $3 to $4 million per site over the last 6 years is not a lot of money when you talk about painting. I mean, I just did my kitchen and it costs an arm and a leg. And so I just feel like, that we need to also keep that number in mind, not just the raw number, but the actual number of schools that we're serving and the number of students that we're serving. And so that's important to keep in mind as we go forward, because while, yes, we did invest a lot of money in deferred maintenance projects, we still have a lot of needs. When we're visiting sites, we see all their needs. I talk to teachers and I talk to principals, and they tell us what their needs are, and it's not being met at this time. And I have another question about El Rancho, because I know right now they're trying to solicit some monies for their bathrooms, and so they didn't qualify for matching funds back when, but yet on this page, it says that they could qualify for some in the future. So had they waited to do their project, could they have gotten their money, or was the timing bad, or was there not that understanding? I just want to have a better understanding of how that money, they could have had that money in their pocket, because I would rather have El Rancho have that money instead of it. I just need some clarification on that.
Okay.
Because it bothers me that they didn't get any matching funds.
It bothered us too. Fran was she was so upset. So we applied under the charter school program, and that program had priority points. We weren't eligible to apply for modernization funding for that scope of work. So you do have eligibility at El Rancho for other modernization type work, but it just didn't happen to work for the science and gymnasium project.
You can't go back.
I'm sorry.
So they would
Breaks
have
my
to
heart
come up
'cause I
with
went
another
there.
project to do in order to qualify for some more
Yes.
money, state matching.
We know you have eligibility now. We just need to figure out what you want to go for in terms of, going to DSA and getting approval and Department of Ed.
That's a bummer. Yeah. My kids went to
We're
El
leaving
Rancho.
no stone unturned.
It sounds like it, and it's truly appreciated. So thank you, ladies, for everything and all your hard work and trying to find that penny somewhere to add to the other ones. So again, thank you so much, and bringing a lot of optimism, and hopefully we can see more of it as we move forward. But we'll see how these bond measures go forward, and whether they do or don't, who knows. So thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you.
All right. Next presentation.
So before we start the next presentation, I don't know if the board, I could take a 5-minute break, or you just want me to move forward?
Let's go.
Okay. So the next item is going to be our asset management plan. So there's 3 elements that I'm going to cover in this presentation, and Mr. Yeoman's going to cover the surplus guidelines with me. So our facility master plan, we had it board approved in 2021 after about a 2-year process, 2.5-year process, and over 1,000 stakeholders being involved in that process. It covers the elementary and middle. The high schools have their own master plan. That was part of the Measure S election in 2016. So the other thing that the state required as we were going through adoption of a master plan is now they require, if you're going to go after state matching funds, you have to have a facility master plan. So either by lucky or by choice, we were doing it, so now we qualify for the funding. But there's things that have happened since we've adopted our plan that, causes concern for me, whether we whether the state's going to look at our master plan and say, if it's not in there, you're not going to qualify. And we don't know because this is a new foundation for us. But we've had new programs, expansion of our educational program, and we're providing services for students that we hadn't provided before, much in part because of COVID or after COVID. So the intent of the master plan, it's what's going to guide you, and you need to look at that every 3 to 5 years. That's what's advised, and that you update that accordingly. So as we look at the master plan, in the facilities long-range master
Mr.
plan,
Rivera,
that's-
I had a quick question about that time, because I noticed that it says reassessed every 3 to 5 years, but in our facilities master plan, and we always want to reassess, obviously, to see if things have changed, but it says our facilities master plan is strategic and identifies a vision for the next 10 to 15 years. So I guess I'm a little, obviously we put this together with
there's two
thousands of
different-
people.
Yes, there's two different messages.
Right.
It's forecasting, because it's a 10-year projection for, let's say, enrollment decline.
Mhm.
It's forecasting a need for the next 10 years. What we're saying here is that we need to revisit to see if the plan needs to be adjusted. And because of COVID and all the changes that have happened, our work is different than it was before the master plan.
Well, and obviously TK programs and different programs like that.
Exactly.
I understand, yeah.
So you have like the community school grant, that was not part of the master plan, that
True.
didn't exist.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that there's something wrong with the master plan. What I'm saying is that I recommend that we revisit it to see, is there an impact on our facilities because of these programs that we have now that we didn't have before?
Got it. Okay. I just
That's
wanted
That's
clarification
simply
on
what
that.
the statement means.
Thank you.
So the first is to reassess the master plan to see, does it meet all the needs of the programs that we have now? Yes or no? And then what would that look like? Second recommendation is to update our permanent inventory, whether it's a permanent sticks and brick mortar or our temporary buildings, because many of our temporary buildings are more than 20 years old. And as you saw earlier, they weren't meant to be there more than 20 years, and I think we can win an award for the number of portables that we have are that age. So also look at, do we have age-appropriate facilities, whether it's a restroom or a playground? And then, should we be replacing some of these portables because they've lived their useful life? And then looking at our preschool programs, our little programs, how does that meet the needs of those programs? And do we need to do some things to better ensure our compliance for our special needs students and other grants? And thirdly, that we come up with a plan and that we identify things for you as part of this assessment as to where do we prioritize. So part of today's strategy was, let's talk about problems, but let's also talk about solutions. Because I never want to come in front of the board without offering you different options and what that would look like. And how this all is aligned with the board objectives.
Any questions? No? Go.
In general?
No, just on this part.
Yeah, I guess the question about portables, and it sounds like if we replace portables, we actually can get some reimbursement for that as well? Okay. That was a question I had.
60-40.
Okay. So it sounds to me like.
Let me clarify that.
Okay.
If you have 3 portables that you want to replace,
Mhm.
but you put 4 down, because we're declining enrollment, we don't qualify for funding for the 4th portable.
Got it.
Because
Okay.
that's growth, right? Unless, and there's some schools that would qualify because of their parameters. But in general, the 3 portables that we're replacing, we can get reimbursement for replacing those 3.
So just, and maybe this may be coming later, but so obviously for our campuses, there was a period of great growth. So we started at a certain number, whatever that number was. Our campuses grew immensely. Also, our services grew.
It was around 32,000.
Right. So we went from filling these classrooms to then expanding beyond the classrooms where we had to put these portables down. And I know at just El Medina and Villa Park, there's multiple portables. And part of the goal with Measure Us was to get rid of every portable we could, so we didn't need them anymore. But now as we're shrinking, it sounds like we're almost shrinking back into our original footprints, and we could potentially get rid of all of those portables. Is that something, I mean, I think that's something we need to study so that we can say, okay, can we have our campuses and get rid of as many portables as possible? I mean, that's kind of I guess, an upside, if there is one, for declining enrollment, to not have to have those 30-year-old portables on our campuses.
Certainly, and I think it's a consideration is we have service providers now that we didn't have 5 years ago.
Right.
Right.
There's so many different services that we're not just standard sitting in a classroom facing the front. We have,
Correct.
like you said, community schools where we have parent rooms, community rooms, like you said, the service provider rooms.
So what we could do is provide a report for the board of what that would look like site by site. Because it could not be a generic, under one umbrella, it fits this way. No, it depends on what programs are being run. We have some schools with a large number of special ed students, special needs students. So we would need to custom the numbers as to what their needs, facility needs are. So in some cases, it could be that we could replace some portables because they're not needed. Some cases, we should replace the portables because it's an upgrade to the current program and what they have.
Thank you.
Was there any other questions that I can answer?
No.
Okay. So this dovetails into the asset management plan. So the first question is, why do we need an asset management plan? And it's simple. I just Googled the top 15 property owners in the US. So you see some familiar faces on here. I think everyone knows who the cable mogul Ted Turner. So he owns 2 million acres, which is over 87 billion square feet of property, and he's worth $2.2 billion. So there's a correlation between how much property they own and their net worth. Stan Kroenke, he's the owner of the Rams. He owns several sports teams. So you can see his net worth is $13 billion. This is not their corporation, this is their individual wealth. If you ever gone to a Subway was started by Peter Buck, and he owns 40 billion square feet of property. Well, 3 of the 4 on this list have an asset management plan. We don't have an asset management plan. But just for our school sites, I didn't add the district office, I didn't add the Collins site, I didn't add some of the other facilities. If we add all those facilities, we're probably close to 700 acres. So right now for our school sites, we have 26.3 million square feet of property. And if you take $1 million an acre, which is not the going rate in orange, that's over $600 million of property. If you take a look at what the real rate is, it's somewhere between $1 million to it's probably $1 billion to $2 billion in raw estimate of what we own in just land. So if we have this much land, we need to have a plan of how we manage that in terms of an asset. So the reason I'm bringing this point up, this is information from Ed data, and this is enrollment data for the state. So you can see in 2014, there was 6.2 million kids enrolled in public education. Public education is defined in a regular school or a charter school. So you can see over time, in 22, 23, that number is 5.8 million. So you can see how that number has changed over time. And for any school district in this state, the local control funding formula is the largest funding source. And the largest funding source is contingent on the number of kids you serve. So this formula for funding for schools is going to be directly impacted by decline. I pulled up, what is, yes?
Is it possible to get data on how many kids go to private schools?
Yes.
Because I want to see if they're declining, if they are in declining enrollment, or if it's comparable, or maybe some of our students are going to private schools instead.
We can pull that information for
Okay,
you.
thank you.
So one of the factors affecting the state is that they run data as to the number of residents leaving and the residents coming in. And here's information that's been provided by Department of Finance. So you can see through 22 that the decline of population is growing. So the number of families leaving are greater than the number of families coming in. And only really 3 times in the last 30 years was that positive. Now, here's the finance side of me. When we take a look at who's leaving, there's 2 bars. The black bar is the people that are leaving that have less than a bachelor's in terms of education. The red bar are those that are leaving that have a bachelor or more. The state's tax model is based off the higher wage earners for the taxpayers. So they pay a disproportionate amount of taxes. So when you take a look at this arrow, and you can see that there was more people coming in than leaving for many years, and then in 2018, that is now starting to decline. And actually, these 2 lines are getting close to one another. And that's a horrible signal for one reason. The largest tax earners, taxpayers, are leaving the state. So what is that going to do to the state? It's going to create a fiscal crisis, right? If this trend continues.
Which we're currently in.
And it may aggravate that situation. So our funding is contingent on the number of kids that we serve. So you can see here 3 reasons why we need to consider an asset management plan, because we need to subsidize and sustain where our current programs are with any external funding. That's also been identified in our strategic plan. How do we leverage what we're doing, right, with external funding? So in terms of an asset management plan, you can see some elements, 3 elements that would be included, whether you're a private business or you're a school district. What the intent of the use of this asset management plan would generate. And then what the expected outcomes. So it's going to help you subsidize what you're currently doing, so that way you don't have to stop. You don't have to eliminate, you don't have to reduce what your goals and missions are. So let me tell you a story about a district that I used to work at, which is South Whittier School District in the Whittier area. So when I was there, I was the CBO there for 4 years, from 2007 to 2011. This is Carmela Elementary School. Sits right in the corner of Carmenita and Lakeland. This whole area here was a grass field. And on the weekend, the soccer teams came out, and it was large enough to have 3 soccer fields, full-size soccer fields, 3 fields side by side. Our ground staff, well, I'm not with them anymore. The ground staff would come in and take all day just to mow the field. It was so large. So I talked to the superintendent. I said, you know, this is an asset management play here, because there's opportunities here that grass field can't possibly be used by the kids. It's too large. So I was surprised when I drove by there the other day that they have changed it. So now this is what you see. There was a preschool program here, a large grass field, and then the school. So they surplus that extra grass field and they built, they didn't build, but they sold the property, which was then developed. So what happens with the money that got generated from that? So with the development from the building, there's called developer fees. All the people that came and built that building employed, stimulated the economy, increasing the property values by whatever that value of those apartment buildings are. I asked my team, what does it cost to maintain a field? It's between $30,000 to $40,000 per acre. That's for the water, that's for the ground staff, and the equipment cost. So when you're looking at property like this, which they probably surplused 8 acres, that probably is going to save them $300,000 a year in operations. So they took an expense and made it a revenue, right? And with all these buildings being built, that has to increase enrollment, which then helps the district from an operations standpoint. So do we have situations like this? Yes, we do. The funds that they generated from the surplusing of the land. When you look through this list, this is a deferred maintenance plan, right? These are elements of a deferred maintenance plan. So you can do a number of things in taking an asset that is being underutilized, like in the Carmela example, and using it for your purpose. How would you determine what property to pick? Well, first of all, when we talk about real property, that's a closed session item. We don't talk about that in open session. But what we do talk about are the criteria. So how much property we're talking about, the access to the property, the marketability of the property, and the fact that it doesn't impact the program or the community. So obviously, if you're looking at a school that's fully enclosed and you have residential property surrounding it, that's not going to be a good candidate for surplusing. But if you have access to the main boulevard, or it has entry point, egress, then those are things that we can look at and bring you back some recommendations of what would be considered a viable property, and we would do that in the closed session environment. Then you can give us direction on what that would look like, or if there's even interest of the board to consider that.
Yes, because there's multiple properties I can think of off the top of my head.
So I've given you copies. There's some reports over here at my desk that we've given you access. This is just samples of what would be in an asset management plan. And this is really just custom by what the board's interest is, board's needs. So I can help craft that. I can, if the board is interested in having that discussion and crafting it themselves and updating it, it really depends on you and what your interest is. There's no defined rule as it has to be done by the CBO or by the superintendent. This can be drafted by anyone who the board desires and really reflect the needs, what your needs are and your operational goals. The
Well, I think it's being
dots.
realistic, Mr. Rivera, at that document as well.
I'm sorry?
I said it's being realistic with that document as well. So, and so, probably your staff or somebody or one of the DLR, I'm sure doesn't do it, but somebody else will do it. Or this can be part of the 7-Eleven.
Yeah, so this, let me just finish one thought, and I think I can answer your question, Mr. Ortega. So the ... dots means that's where the district's name would be. So I just took out the example from Washington Unified, which I believe is up in Northern California, and be replaced with our district name. Here's the copies of the reports that we've made available to you. So the recommendation is for the board to give direction on the development of an asset management plan. We would talk about in closed session what those properties are. We would want to hear the criteria that the board would prioritize. And then we would engage with Mr. Yeoman and our property advisor, which is Jerry Sewich, on what makes sense. Ms. Yamasaki, you had a question?
Yes, I noticed that the two examples that you gave us, they were from 2007. Do you have newer asset management plans?
We can try to find you something that's more current,
Yeah, that would be nice.
but I was just giving an example of what a one would look like.
Okay.
Yes.
So how, and if this is a closed session question, that's fine, but how much is there a likelihood of getting a property rezoned so that it could be purchased? And like, for example, that Carmela Elementary, I don't know how it is in the city of Orange, but would it be difficult for that property, for the excess land, to be sold for real estate purposes with the kind of environment that we live in right now?
Well, what I've learned is that the reason that property values are so high is because there's a lack of inventory. So the more houses that you have, then the prices actually will come down. But we don't have that. I mean, the reason that property values are high in Orange is because you don't have a lot of property for sale or property that can be developed. So those would be discussions that we would have with the county or with the city, because what they also collect developer fees. So there's some benefits to them because they would also get the increase in property values. So there's going to be formulas, and without speaking for the city, there's formulas that could work in their best interest for them to say, yes, we approve this plan.
And
But that would be having a conversation with them, and we have not had any conversations with them because we wanted to get direction from the board before engaging the
I
cities.
just think on, like, I know, I personally don't live over there, but I know it's not even our property, but the city owns the former village, right? It's called the village now, the Orange Mall. And there's been a lot of turmoil with the neighborhoods there not wanting, more housing in that area. The traffic's, they're saying the traffic's already bad enough. So is that something OUSD would have to deal with when it comes to selling a property to a particular person versus?
That would be part of the conversation that would take place with the city, because if you're building, let's say, 25 homes, well, the traffic from 25 homes is not really going to change the neighborhood, right? So it depends on how big the complex is. If you're building 300 units, that's a different problem. So it depends on the size of the project, in the units of the project.
Right.
Because some people, they want single-family homes, right? They don't want a townhome, they don't want a condo. But you will find as you look around as to what happens when there's a development. So like in my neighborhood, I live in Fullerton. As soon as they knocked down the Hughes plant and started building 1,200 units, the property values literally doubled. So there is a positive effect on the community in assessed values and property values, because when new development comes in, that's a factor in what happens with new development.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I do have a question. So when you talk about benefits to the school districts and community, including potential increase to student enrollment, do you know in the case of Washington Unified and South Pasadena, did student enrollment increase when they had an asset management plan as well, or?
There was an increase in enrollment. I can look through the report and get you some information as to what the impact was, how many units, because usually the number of units or the increase in enrollment is contingent on the type of construction. So if they're building, let's say, apartment buildings, that may not generate the same number of students as, let's say, a residential, because it depends on what the family is interested in. So the two actually have different yields. And we get these reports from our demographer, annually, so we can go back to see what the impact for those communities were with these developments and how did they benefit in the long run?
As an example, when we had property over here that bordered Anaheim and Orange, because there wasn't going to generate enough students, we basically gave the land to Anaheim. And then Anaheim, I wouldn't say elementary or high school district, well, both, they were able to utilize it and build their apartments on there because it wasn't generating enough for us to do, for the income to receive. So we basically gave it to them. I don't know, that was years ago when they were building up the whole communities over on that side.
And also one more question. With schools like Villa Park High School, for increased property values, would our school district receive extra funding in regards to increased property values as well? Because I know certain school districts sometimes receives funding off attendance, sometimes off property value. So what's the case?
So you ask a good question. So there's the geographic area of the district, right? So our geographic area is 108 square miles. Villa Park's a small piece of that. So when the state gives us funding, they look at all the property values within that 108-mile sector. So the first layer of funding that we get is property taxes from the property owners. Anything that we get above that comes from the state in the form of state aid. So let's say, for sake of argument, that we're supposed to get $200 million. And through property taxes, we collect $100 million. So the state aid contribution to us is $100 million. So if the property taxes go up, the state is actually going to pay us less. And what has happened over time, when you look at our property taxes, because our property taxes have been growing at about a 6% clip, that they've been growing faster than the state has been funding us. So actually the one who benefits from high property increases is the state, not us. Because this is a zero-sum game. We're going to get a fixed amount of money, and that fixed amount of money isn't going to change if property taxes go up. The state's just going to make the offset. And this is what was different during now in the Great Recession, because in the Great Recession, property values were declining. So the state had to make up more money. They didn't have the funds, so that's how come they applied up to a 22% deficit factor, because they couldn't pay us. But we don't see that situation right now, because property values are very high, and we don't see them declining nearly to the extent they were during the Great Recession in 2007 to 2013.
I think, because I think there's a lot of discussion about how school funding shouldn't depend on your zip code. I think you hear that argument a lot, and California is just different in how we fund. It is funded in other areas by the amount of money, basically by property taxes, but LCFF in 2014, was that?
2000, yeah, it was adopted in 2013 and implemented in 2014.
Right, so it changed how California funds. So we end up with a set amount, no matter what the property values are, but increased property values is still good for the people that own their homes. So there's other benefits to it, but it wouldn't affect our funding so much. I think not concern. I'm all for long-term planning. I was all for the facilities master plan and push for that, all for the strategic initiative, push for that. And an asset management plan is great. I think what concerns me is, we need to operate from the point in space where we know anything we do with a piece of property is going to impact our students, impact our families, impact our community. And we need to make sure that whatever action we're taking is done with a proper cost-benefit analysis. We also spent a lot of people's time coming up with this strategic initiative. And we utilized, I was looking at the sheet of paper of all the people that participated in the facilities master plan. It's 5 pages of people, almost 1,000 people. And so we came up with these strategies for our facilities. We came up with strategies for where we want to see our district go in the next 5 years, in the next 10 to 15 years. So I want to make sure that whatever asset management plan we have is very inclusive of those things that we've already done. In other words, a lot of people, it doesn't seem even know that we have a facilities master plan. And that was something that was worked on, again, by a lot of people with a lot of input that had knowledge of those specific sites. So we had teams from, for instance, Anaheim Hills Elementary School that said specifically what they wanted for those schools. So it's very sort of hyper-local, our facilities master plan. And so I want to make sure that we don't veer too far away from the work that we've done. And so that we make sure that our mission for our asset management plan is consistent with that. And that is to make sure, for instance, the facilities master plan, this vision, will assist in developing the broad visioning concept, guiding principal themes, input on the conceptual school site master plans, and prioritization of proposed projects to bring forward to the Board of Trustees. Facilities master plan group consists of a broad representation of key stakeholders in the district and local community. So, and that mission, all of those people came together to identify those long-term demographic trends, to assess the current facilities. And they wanted to make sure that these schools, and our school property was benefiting our students. And that we were acting in a way that was obviously fiscally prudent, which we've proven that we have done over the last few years since we've increased our credit rating twice in the last 4 years, 5 years. So, I mean, we do well with our fiscal house. We've done well with it. And so I don't want to throw away good work. I want to make sure that when we're moving forward, we're encompassing all of the work that we've already done and keeping a very, very focused eye on ensuring that we are benefiting our students. We are trustees for the Orange Unified School District. We're not trustees for for everybody that is here. We have to keep our students' interests first and foremost and our families' interests first and foremost. And when we can benefit other groups and benefit ourselves, if it's a win-win, great. If it's a lose-win, we can't do that. And we need to make sure that we are really focused on the cost-benefit analysis to Orange Unified. And that isn't just financial costs. That's all sorts of costs. So I want to make sure that when we move forward with it, that's my vision. I mean, I want to fulfill our facilities master plan. I want to have all of those programs that our parents and our teachers and our stakeholders envisioned. And I want to have those facilities that are going to meet the needs of our children. And so, you know, we have an opportunity in a way. Like I said, we don't want to lose funding, and that's a bad thing, but there are some good things to opening up places for the programs that we've envisioned as a community, going to those schools and making sure that we're, you know, we have fidelity to what it is that we've planned previously. So that's it. I guess not really a question, but just a concern.
Any questions? Ms. Rumsey.
I just have a quick comment. Piggybacking a little bit on what you're saying, I hear what you're saying, and I agree. But what I'm looking at is slide 22, which the second paragraph says, asset management in the context of a public school district means that the public agency will treat its real property assets in a business-like fashion. And as you're going through this presentation and you use the example of your previous district, this is, you know, I think about most public schools have these enormous fields. A business is expected to operate efficiently by handling assets that it has invested in a way which furthers its goals. And, you know, and I look at the previous presentation where a lot of our schools were built in the 50s and the 60s. And just these huge pieces of property which are necessary, but also we're living in a different time now. This is the 21st century. So the needs of the students are different. If those goals change and the assets no longer contribute to the successful implementation of a education plan, then the school or district would consider disposing of the assets. In this way, essential capital is freed up for other uses, which would then be applied, I'm assuming, to making sure the needs that were expressed in, I forget what you called it, the planning meetings or. Yeah. You know, I don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it just seems like this sums it up really nicely. Similarly, if a public school district can reorganize its assets to more efficiently achieve its mission purpose, then it should at least study and consider those possibilities. I really like the way this is written. Such a planning effort is particularly true when, as in the case of the Orange Unified, I'm assuming that's what it is, parts of the district appear to be in severe student enrollment decline for the foreseeable future. So, you know, I don't disagree with anything you're saying at all. I think we need to keep those things in mind and honor those things, but also take a look at some opportunities that we have here.
Well, I think if I can combine both of your thoughts here, it might be an example, might be where you might have a lot of field space, and maybe some of that gets surplused, and some of that gets sold. And you might use some of that money to fulfill a facilities master plan project on that site, like a multi-purpose room. So, you know, some of those things can be accomplished by both. You know, we're managing it like a business. We're taking that money, we're investing it back into the site where then students can perform, you know, they can participate, we can use a multi-purpose room. And it might, in addition to maybe if it becomes housing, like we said, and bring enrollment, it also might attract students to the school because the facilities are now in a place where it can promote and improve the academic program.
May I ask a question along those lines, Mr. Gonzalez? So if, for example, a school, call it School A, sold off parts of their grass, does that money go directly to that school that just sold its property?
It doesn't have to, but that might be a parameter that might be set by the board in terms of commitments made to sale of that property, or the board could choose to do something other. There are some limits to what you can use with the money, and Mr. Rivera, I'm sure, could discuss that. But some of it might also be at the direction of the board in setting the some of the parameters, you know, should we go into a surplus property situation.
It has to be spent on the schools that we have, facilities that we have. And this is a sample of a project list.
Any other questions? Ms. Yamasaki?
Yes, thank you. I just want to reiterate that the facilities master plan, it was passed in 2021, so it wasn't that long ago. The process took over 24 months. We had 85 meetings. We had 2,000 individuals that included students, staff, and teachers, administration, and stakeholders throughout the district that was involved with this process. So it wasn't something that was just done by a few people. It was done by a lot of people, and I think we spent about $1 million doing this. Am I correct? Do you remember? I thought it was $1 million, but nevertheless,
I can find out. I can verify that because
Okay.
it's been 2 or 3 years, but I can verify the number. I believe the number was maybe 750, 800,000.
Okay.
But I can verify that.
So my whole point is that we invested a lot of money and time and effort in creating this facilities master plan. So I think it's really important for us to really have a better understanding of it. And since we have some new board members who may or may not be familiar with it, I mean, it was a huge document and we have it on a thumb drive and it was a lot to go through. Each site had their own characteristics and what they wanted, what they didn't need, what they needed. And so I think it's really maybe important for us to have a refresher of what was in it before we even move forward. I think an asset management plan is a good idea as well, because I like the idea of planning. The one thing I wanted to emphasize that when we're surplusing any types of property is that we get top dollars for anything that we surplus. Like, it's my understanding, though, we don't always get to choose who buys our properties, right?
So that would be done through an RFP process, and actually, Mr. Yeoman, we knew you were going to ask that question, so Mr. Yeoman here is to answer it for you.
Okay,
So the second half of this presentation is to talk about the surplus process,
okay.
because we anticipate that we were going to have questions like this come up.
Okay, so I'll wait on my question, and we'll listen to the next part, and I'll...
Any other questions?
But think of this as a supplement to what we're already doing, and a strategy that could help generate dollars that can allow us to do some necessary improvements without having to go out for a bond, because that's really the only funding source that we have outside of what we have in our internal reserves, is to get an external funding source. In all the districts around us, that's exactly how they were able to improve their facilities, because they passed not one, but multiple bonds. I think I've shared with the board that the major 5 districts around us had passed like 12 bond issuances collectively. So, and I know that's a challenge here, and there's, no one's really wanting to pay more taxes. I get that, but that's how our neighboring districts did it. So we're going to have to be creative on how to maintain our schools and fix our schools. if
Can
we
you
don't have-
remind everyone, like Tustin passed 3 or 4?
Tustin passed 3, Santa Ana, I believe, passed 2 or 3,
And Yorba Linda passed
passed
Central
like
Yorba.
3.
3.
So
Can
I
you
have a-
also remind people how much it's costing average per year?
So for Measure S, it's costing $25.33 per $100,000 of assessed value. So if your house is assessed for $200,000, then it's double that amount.
So you pay
Not market value,
$100.
it's
Not
assessed
market-
value.
It's assessed value.
So what's the average assessed value? $500,000 or?
It's about $500,000 once you take, because we have a great number of houses that are at the low end of the assessed value. So probably an average is about 500,000.
So it's,
So
we'll
you're
just
saying
call it
$250
$150 a year for
Or
the
150?
average person, how much they're paying
Yeah,
towards
it's
Measure
less
S.
than 150 a year.
Yeah, it's like 143, I can't remember what the exact number, but just to remind people, because sometimes that sounds really scary, and it's really $143, and I'm sure people's home values have gone up more than $143.
And when we did the study, supposedly our values will increase based on, property values will increase based on having better schools or upgraded schools in our district, correct?
Yeah, when you take a look at our assessed values have grown at a high rate, one of the highest rates in the county.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And just to conclude is that it's showing the public, though, of, you keep mentioning school bonds, but let's try to focus on what this is all about, the asset management plan. It's looking at the unused or underutilized assets that we do currently have, and there are many that we do have in this district.
To be
And
clear,
so
we're not mentioning school
please
bonds to pass
stop.
more. We're just
Please
pointing out
stop.
what we have.
Okay, please stop. Just stop for a minute, okay? Let me finish. I didn't interrupt you. So, who's talking about you? You feeling guilty? So, let me finish if I can. So my point is utilizing this, and as Ms. Rumsey stated too in here, is that this is a, where is it? Oh, sorry, I'm jumping ahead. A business-like fashion. We did, and she put it very eloquent. Yeah, we did pass and looked at a facilities master plan. But, I would like to drive a Ferrari, but I don't. Versus what do I want versus what do I need? And that's a business operation, and how do we look at it business operationally speaking? And so it's looking at what are we going to do in an operational aspect, if you will, in all of our schools, and being strategic in that manner and how to go about doing that. And I think that's, some of it is jumping ahead, where if we looked at the 7-Eleven committee, You know, we're going to look at individuals who have to serve on this committee. Yes, there was a lot of respectful individuals that put a lot of time and effort into the facility master plan, but at the same juncture, that was at a time when we would like X, Y, and Z, and then we would like A through Z now. And as I said, I'd like to drive a Ferrari, but I can't. So we have to be realistic with what we have and how are we going to move forward. You know, as I brought up earlier in your prior presentation, is we're still being effective in what we're trying to accomplish with our ESSER monies, our deferred maintenance monies, and we cannot minimize any of that. And we have to be optimistic about these things. You know, we can't just minimize and go, well, we're not spending. Well, of course, but we're spending prudently like we should be and within our realm of the monies that are being presented to us in that aspect. And so, you know, as I mentioned, you know, I don't know what the final number is going to be. What we heard, it's going to be 26, could be $30 billion. The state's going to be in the red. So we are looking and doing our due diligence in this asset management plan as to our unused and underutilized assets. And as mentioned in here is in a business opportunity to be efficient in handling our assets. In which, as you said, we can't speak about these in public because there's multiples of them. And it's no different than some of you, hopefully you've read in the paper over the last year or so, is Ocean View School District did their due diligence over a span of time because they have to reduce their deficit or reduce their budget because of a deficit. So they looked at potentially 4 to 5 schools of closing, and then they shifted around how they're going to be utilized and maximized. You know, so this is part of the due diligence that we're doing and showing to the public that we are maximizing our assets. So I want people to understand that, and this board to understand too, that we got to be optimistic, and we're in a position that most districts are not in. And so we have this opportunity. Let's see what we can do with it. Let's seek that opportunity.
So you're stealing much of my script.
So,
But I go to this slide here. It's evident what the trend is. Sometimes what districts do, unfortunately, is that they wait because they have such a thing called hope. They hope things get turned around. Well, hope is not a strategy. And I think being forward thinkers and planning, you're going to see next week our first interim report. And the only way I can characterize it is we are, if not in the strongest financial position, number 2 in the county. So we have the benefit of what some other districts do not have because we have been very strategic of how we have built our reserves and balanced our budgets. And I'm not even talking about real estate. I'm just talking about general operation. This will even give you a stronger position because now you're going to be using 600 acres of your property to leverage what you do in the classroom. So you're going to be in a position that most districts are not going to be in. And waiting doesn't make that position stronger. Actually, waiting depreciates that strength. So I think it's wise for the board to take a look at this. Do you have to implement something tomorrow? No. Do you have to implement something a year from now? No. But making decisions, talking about it, also gives you a long plateau to implement something. Because unfortunately, districts that are talking about school closure, they have to take immediate action because there's a fiscal distress. So if you keep making decisions 3 to 5 years out, like we do when we do our budget planning, that we show you a 5-year projection, that's smart planning because you can anticipate something. When you read FCMAT reports about districts that are going through closures and fiscal crisis, they knew they had a problem 3 years earlier, but they didn't act on it. Here, by looking at what we see in the horizon, if you want to do something now for 3 years from now, great, we have 3 years to plan. But we're not going to be in the position that we're going to be making some decisions that we would have regretted, didn't think through. You know, you have that time and ability to do that. And just ask for the information you want and we'll get it for you.
Well, we've been talking about facilities for the last couple of years and nothing's been done. You know, it's like typical government talk. Let's just keep talking about it. Nothing gets done. You know, so this is perfect to be able to move forward with an asset management plan in this manner. So, Mr. Yeoman, that's the next steps to.
I was careful not to steal any of his thunder.
No, I was gonna inject a little bit, but I didn't, so.
Can I just ask one quick question? It's more of a clarification you had asked earlier, and what jogged my memory is the enrollment, the decline in enrollment. You had asked for private school enrollment. I'm just like, why? Like, what's the purpose of that number?
I want to see if there's a correlation to see if our students are leaving for private school.
Okay. So what kind of data are you going to give us? How many kids in Orange go to private schools or in California?
I think
or-
what typically the information we give to the board, which we may need to look at to update before giving it to you, is we tend to look at birth rates, and then we look at transfers of districts, of students to other districts.
Right.
And then we look to those students that are choosing to go to private school. And so between that, you can kind of figure about how many students you have, because if nobody left our district at all and went to any private school or went to any other district, we would still decline because of the birth rate.
Okay.
So you need to have all of that information to
Yeah,
really
yeah.
kind of understand that chart that goes down. So I think that's probably the information that we would look at, update, and provide to you.
Okay.
And I will keep the presentation short to, let's say, 2 hours or less.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Yeoman.
Mr. Yeoman. Again.
Save the best for last.
Exactly.
There's been a lot of discussion about potential surplus property, either on existing sites that don't necessarily need as much property as they currently have. And since we saw so many of the school sites that were maybe 50 years old, and back then when you had enormous populations, you might have 20 acres that were required. Now with smaller student bodies, maybe not all of that property is necessary. Maybe there's an extra 5 acres or something similar to that on one or more properties that still does not impact the educational mission of the particular schools, but could help finance and give the districts some of the financial ability to do the master plan, some of the deferred maintenance and things that are necessary. But in order to do anything prior to selling or leasing any property that is deemed to be not needed for school purposes, the board has to appoint a district advisory committee, also known as the 7-Eleven committee. And that 7-Eleven committee advises the governing board in developing policies and procedures governing the use or disposition of the surplus property. And what's important is that it is just an advisory committee. They're making recommendations to the board, and ultimately the decisions are going to be made by the board. And a lot of this is very statute driven. So the 7-Eleven committee, just as it indicates, is a minimum of 7, maximum of 11 members. And the statutes only provides 7 different categories where you need to have at least one representative. You can have multiple representatives that, encompass more than one category. You just need to make sure you have someone in each of these categories. And generally what happens, and I'll skip, let's see. It's generally is that the board would say, we want to establish a 7-Eleven committee, and authorizes the submission of applications that could be sent out to the constituents, and they provide their input, their interest level, and then ultimately the board decides, okay, who are those 7-Eleven members? It could be based upon recommendations from the superintendent or the CBO or a combination of individuals. But then you have who is going to be on that committee. And you then need to also instruct them, okay, what property or properties do you want them to look at? Because if you have them look at all your properties, you're going to have 300 meetings as they look at every single property. And so you need to kind of narrow the scope. Okay, what would you like them to look at? I mean, you could do it as a phase. Phase one, we're going to look at school A, B, and C. Second phase, once you go through, you can add more if you want to make it more manageable. And that's a possibility too. But going back, so in the composition, usually in all the different 7-Eleven committees that I've advised, or there's always a teacher, there's always an administrator, which you need. You want to have all the different socioeconomic groups there and age things. So you always kind of want to try to have someone from the senior group that's there, someone that's, the different categories, depending on, what schools you're looking at too, to make sure they're representative of the areas in which you're looking at. And you want parents of students, obviously, persons with expertise in environmental impact, legal contracts, building codes, land use planning. Frequently, it can be someone from the city or from the county that can give some insight too on some of the kind of questions. Well, what about zoning? Is that going to be difficult for this piece of property or not? They can bring some of that, their institutional knowledge and expertise to the committee in that regard. But the 7-Eleven committee is tasked with a few different things. They review the projected school enrollment. They establish a priority list of use of surplus space and real property acceptable for the community. Is this something that would be only acceptable for single-family housing? Is it something where they feel that it should really be leased because there may be a change in the demographics and there may be an increase in the population? So this don't dispose of that portion of the property. Just try to lease it, long-term lease. That's a possibility. And then as part of this process, the committee needs to circulate throughout the attendance area their priority list of the surplus space. They have public hearings where they want to have the community input through their meetings. And so they can really find out, okay, this is what I think, find out the community within those particular geographic areas of the school sites. And then ultimately, they're making a report and it goes to the board with their recommendations. This is what we believe should happen on these particular sites based upon all the meetings that we've had, the community input, the public hearings that we've had. And then the board determines, are you going to declare the property surplus, either sell or lease the property? Are you going to develop the property or retain the property for present or future school use? I mean, those are all the variables. And I try to put just kind of a flow chart. I mean, it gets a lot more complicated, but obviously the first thing is the district advisory committee. And then the board, based upon the recommendations, the staff report that they receive from the district advisory committee determines, okay, are we going to declare any of these properties or portions of these properties surplus, that they're no longer needed for school purposes? If they do, then you have the NAILR Act compliance, you have notice to priority entities. It's like the city and the county, the universities. You have to provide notice of them, give them the opportunity to purchase if that's what the district is wanting to do with the property. There's no obligation. The district actually agrees to it, to any of the offers that might be given by any of these priority entities. The NAILR Act is basically for recreational uses that have been used for that for at least 8 years preceding that decision to surplus, and also that there's no other suitable recreational area in that vicinity. Usually there is. And so a lot of times, even if a district or county might be interested in doing the Naylor Act because they can purchase it for less than fair market value, there's not funds in their budget for that purpose. So seldom does a city or county actually exercise their Naylor Act, even if they want to. I have one that did, but not very often. But then, once you get past that, let's say that you've done all the notices, they've determined that no priority entity is going to receive it, then you have to determine, okay, how are we going to dispose this? Are we going to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education, which the district has done previously for some of its sites? And that can be maybe about a 6-month process, if you're lucky, because you have to get the input from your unions, and you have to have a public hearing on the determination of seeking the waiver. And basically, the State Board of Education wants to know, why are you wanting this? And so you have to put what sections of the education codes you want to have waived. Ultimately, you feel if you do a waiver, the thought is that you can do far better by negotiating the terms of an agreement through an RFP process rather than just having a resolution of intent to sell. And that resolution of intent to sell, if you do that, you have to set forth what the parameters of that offer is that you're going to receive. And an amount not less than such and such a price. Escrow to be with this company. Due diligence of 30 days, whatever the parameters are. And if someone comes back and says, well, I need 60 days, they're non-compliant with the terms of your resolution of intent. So it really hamstrings sometimes the district's ability to dispose the property and, more importantly, get the best price possible. And so frequently you want to seek a waiver from the State Board of Education. But before I hit that real quickly, I'll just say the other parts you can do, and I've had a couple districts that have done this, either you sell it as is, or I've had districts that said, I know this property is going to be worth an awful lot more if I get it entitled before I sell it, because you're removing most of the risk from potential purchasers. And so I've had some districts where they've got the entitlements themselves, and then they marketed the property. And by then, you're getting much more inflated prices because you've just removed the risk. And so long as it's a piece of property that's in a desirable area and configuration, you can do really well. The other way to do is you seek the waiver and you submit an RFP, you get all the proposals, and generally then what will happen is that you'll get the best proposal, but escrow is probably not going to close until they get their entitlements, because that's what gives the value. They want to remove all that risk. When they know they have everything, then they're ready to close escrow, and that could be 2 years or more. So it is a delayed gratification by going through that process, but you're much more apt to get the best purchase price for the property by seeking a waiver and being able to basically negotiate rather than setting forth, you have to address A, B, C, D in my resolution of intent to sell, or you're non-compliant, then you have to start over again. So that's kind of the process. And I can go into excruciating detail on any one of these if there's a desire at this point. But I think I really wanted just to kind of set the stage saying, this is something to consider. And if it's something that the board wanted to go forward, I mean, as soon as, next week or the January meeting, you could just say, yes, we'd like to establish a district advisory committee and direct staff to generate, applications for potential interested parties. But along with that, you may want to also indicate these are the sites that we would like them to take a look at too, because that may impact on the applicants that are going to submit their applications and what areas that they live and if it's in their area where the school is. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question regarding the District Advisory Committee, the 9/11 Committee. So in the past, when they call for applicants, usually it was based on one site, right? So if this is a multiple site committee, you may not have representation from that school site then? Or can you do separate committees for each site that you're looking at?
I mean, you can, but I usually.
I know it's not efficient, but.
Yeah, it's not efficient, and
But my concern is the voices of the
Yeah.
people who live in that community may not be heard if they don't have representation either.
again, you have up to 11 members, so even if you have 2 sites, that say
Okay.
2 or 3 sites, you could have a community member from each of those areas
So they
or
would
those
fit
particular
more than one
schools.
criteria? Is
Yeah.
that what you're saying? Okay.
Now, you can have multiple people in one category, so long as you have at least one person in each of the 7 mandatory categories.
Okay.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I actually do have more questions, but I'm not sure if he's done. I just wanted to make sure I caught that while he was talking about it, but should I just go ahead?
Yeah, no, I saw her hand, that's why, sorry.
Okay. So my understanding, the 7-Eleven process is a pretty long process. You were saying it's up to 2 years?
No. The 7-Eleven committee doesn't have to take 2 years. I'm saying if you,
From start to finish? Like,
I mean, it depends on what process. If you're seeking a waiver, that may take 6 months. And then if you're saying that you're not going to close escrow, let's say you select someone in month, then 3 months or something after you get the approval from the State Board of Education, and then you award. So they may have to put a deposit in, but their due diligence begins. And so you have some paid ups where they have to keep paying toward that purchase price, but it may be 2 years before they get the entitlements from the time you award the contract before you're going to get the lion's share of the purchase price.
so what is the timeline that you're looking at from the time that you put out a call for people on the committee to the time that they actually declare a property surplus?
Are we dealing with multiple properties? I mean, let's say there's 2 properties.
Okay.
And so you put out the application that say you give them 30 days to submit. You're posting it on the website, you're sending it to anyone interested. I mean, I've had, board members where they'll send it to 2 or 3 people themselves, of constituents in their particular areas where the school site is located. And then it's
Then we meet.
going through, but ultimately the board approves
Who
who
is
is
on.
going to be on that committee.
Okay.
And what direction are you going to give them? What sites are you going to be having them look at, site or sites? Then the committee will convene. The very first thing is just an organizational meeting. It's subject to the Brown Act. And so they first elect who their president's going to be, secretary, and they kind of put out, okay, how many meetings do we need? First meeting probably after the organization is like someone like David or someone from facilities, bringing them the information on those particular sites. What are the statistics? How many buildings are we talking about? How much square footage do we have? What do we have in area of the space that's not needed, the grass area that's not needed? I mean, just all the parameters of the site itself. And then the committee starts having their own meetings. And once they have answers to all the things they need and have a kind of a feel, then that's when they have kind of a public hearing, 1 or more. If you have multiple sites, you probably have a public hearing, and sometimes you go to the school itself and have the public hearing there invite all the constituents in that particular school to attend and voice what their concerns are or what their thoughts are. And then the next meeting, you go to the other school and do the same thing. Get all their input, put together the recommendation on one or both of the properties, and then that gets forwarded to the board
Okay.
for their consideration.
So
And then the
it's
board
at
could either
least
say
a,
yay
what,
or nay.
4 to 6 month process for that?
It depends on how collaborative and how much in agreement the members are.
Okay.
I mean, it can go, usually it takes probably a minimum of about 2 or 3 months.
Mhm.
Depends on, everyone's availability and how many meetings you can have in what period of time.
And when our meetings are to approve it and everything?
Yeah, because it always going to have to be in the evenings or something.
Okay. One other question. For the sale of surplus property to happen, does it require a majority or a supermajority of board members to approve it?
It's a 2/3 to declare it surplus, and thereafter, I mean, the resolution of intent requires a 2/3, and so you're
Okay.
going to be setting forth all the requirements that you're going to do, but everyone has to meet. And so whoever meets those expectations, I mean, you're just approving the best proposal. So it doesn't necessarily take a 2/3 vote for that.
Right.
Because, I mean, if you're setting $20 million and someone comes in at 25, sometimes it's very apparent.
Mhm.
I had one at a school district, another Orange County district.
So we don't need the vote to even declare the property surplus?
No, you always have to declare it surplus.
I mean, we don't need a supermajority to declare the property surplus?
2/3 vote of the board, so you need 5 of the
2/3.
7.
So you need I just want to clarify.
Yeah.
You need 2/3 of the board so 5 of 7.
Yep. And that's adopting the resolution of intent, setting
To
forth.
adopt?
Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? Okay, any others? Okay. All right, Mr. Yeoman, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I know it sounds a little challenging, but it's actually pretty easy to do. We did this several times already.
That's right.
And so it actually moves pretty quickly.
It does.
Once you get those processes in place, once you get the people identified and they set their meetings and their own agendas, and they do have to follow the Brown Act, so staff and somebody will be there, the secretary will take notes and, things of that nature. And so as we did that, we did do with the nailer on 2 of our properties. I don't even remember, going back a long time, Barm Ranch and also Silverado.
Yep.
I think when the county purchased both.
Yep, I remember those.
Yeah, so we did go through that, and it's been pretty successful.
Yes.
But yeah, so we'll look forward to the next meeting for 7-Eleven, just to move forward with the committee and then start sending out the applications and so forth. So thank you so much.
Did you get
and
consensus from
also-
everybody to do that? I don't know.
I don't know.
Well, you just made a statement, so you didn't ask the other board members whether this is
Well, I am,
something they wanted.
okay, I'm asking the other ones.
Pardon?
I'm asking the other ones.
Pardon?
I'm asking the other board members.
Okay. Well, you gave him direction without asking us direction.
So what's the direction that you're
So that's what I
giving
wanted
him?
to find out.
Well, I was just thanking them for all the presentations
And
and
you
the asset
said-
management, and so we'd like to see what would come forward for this.
Well, no, I
So
thought
what's
I
the
just
next
heard you
step?
say to
So
go
next step is
forward.
to be able to provide him the direction to at least bring forward the 7-Eleven committee, just so they can move forward with applications.
Yeah, do you want to establish a 7-Eleven committee?
And do we agree that that is the direction the board
Right.
wants to go with the next step?
Right.
I am in agreement with that.
So I can only look in one direction, and
I
sometimes.
agree with that as well.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, this concludes our meeting at 9:16. Thank you so much.